this.
Ooh, nice mics.
Yeah. Do this.
I could here.
Like it. We'll do this.
Where's the actual camera?
It's right there.
I look at it, anybody, and call them out.
There you go. And then
it's fun. This makes me feel like I feel before I teach, like butterflies, you know.
Chad Boda.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Thank you so much for coming, man.
What
a treat. I have to do it. For those that don't know, Chad Boda grew up here, moved to Sweden a hot minute ago.
Yeah, almost 10 years now. Yeah.
And we're going to have some fun stories about the Sweden and the run and stuff. But most importantly, PhD, Lund University. Mm-hmm. And it's past my pay grade, but your goal and mission in life right now is like our world, right? The ecosystem. And,
yeah, that's what we focus on, all the depressing problems. You know. So, yeah, I mean, that's what my institute does. So I'm at the Center for Sustainability Studies, it's called. It's been around for like 15 years, and it was started by the old director who's now gone on to retire, who had exactly that ambition to try to take all the knowledge that they had at the university and focus it in on climate change and biodiversity loss and these other kinds of major environmental issues. So I've been able to kind of ride on their coattails, so to speak. And they have built a super awesome institution with, you know, a great culture around it and, you know, a lot of legitimacy and these things within Sweden and more within the world. Right. So I'm super happy to be a part of it and, you know, been learning a lot and continue to.
So you graduated FPC in 04 or 03?
I actually graduated 02 because I went a year early.
Smarty pants.
Well, it was like,
because I was 02.
Yeah, exactly. So I was with the 03 class for until the last year, and then I graduated with you guys. A big reason is I was like, had this itch to get out of Flagler, you know, which a lot of people feel early on, especially. Yeah. And so I took a bunch of night classes. It was, you know, FPC gave you opportunities to do these kinds of things. So it was really cool. I took some night classes and, you know, clept some classes, which means you like take their exam, and then that you get the credits for them. And I was able to graduate with the 2002 class and then went almost immediately.
Did you walk with us or did you just?
Yeah.
Did you really? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it was a cool experience, but I don't know. There wasn't any like great celebration or anything. I was just stuck in the crowd with everybody else, rightfully so. But
did you know? Because obviously after high school, everyone starts to go their own ways and stuff. Did you know right then and there? Because I never talked to you about this. Did you know that I want to go be this international, like, you know, traveler / student / like, did you know that the field you want to be in, or all did this start to kind of like evolve?
Yeah, it evolved a lot actually over time. I mean, when I left FPC, I was definitely interested in going somewhere. And I ended up going to Colorado. Actually, that was about 6 months after I graduated, because the first 6 months were up in Tallahassee. My brother Matt was living up there with Brett Ader and Skylar Dixon, some other people. Steve Tate, rather. So I stayed with them for a while and worked some landscaping until I had the opportunity to go out to Colorado. I got accepted to Colorado State University and went to Fort Collins, lived out there for a long time. So that was the first thing. And I actually went out there for like physics, astrophysics. I was a total nerd at the time. I still am, but in a different field. So I started with like hard science, and then gradually as I worked my way through the university, I got more and more interested in kind of biological sciences and then more social sciences. And what I do now is mixing all those things, looking at how people and the environment kind of clash. And
I love it. Yeah. Give me a timestamp of like, so did you do a full 4 in Colorado?
No, there's a lot of weird stuff happened between. Yeah.
Fun weird stuff or bad weird stuff?
I mean, interesting stuff, useful things. But it wasn't a straight shot is my point, you know? So yeah, I went out to Colorado. I went with my brother Josh actually, and my mother moved out there too at the time. So I had some support, family support. We knew Matt Chinchulli was living out there. He went to Colorado State too.
Never knew this.
Yeah. So Matt was living out there, and we actually toured Colorado and Wyoming and stuff prior to moving out there to make sure we liked it. And Matt showed us around the campus, and that was really great.
Did you fall in love with it right away?
I mean, it's so amazing out there. It was so different than here too. That was very one of the things that struck me first. Yeah.
I was super blessed at a young age, which is kind of like a blessing and a curse, but it was a younger age that I went. I was old enough to kind of remember the scenery, the feeling, the community, and Wyoming in general is a really special place. And not just the touristy things like Yellowstone and stuff, even though that's its own monster, but really, really interesting, real cowboy stuff. Like the vastness and the beautiful. So you're there. Give me an idea of like chronological what's happening next. You're starting to kind of get your. I mean, Josh and them, they don't stay with you, right? Everyone starts to probably go their own.
Yeah, kind of. Well, at some point, all of my family was out in Colorado. So my sister moved out at some
I never
point.
knew all this.
My sister stayed the longest of everybody. She actually met somebody was living out there with them for 6-7 years, something like that, maybe even longer.
Wow.
So she was out there a long time before she came back to Daytona. Now she's actually up in Pennsylvania. So she's been moving around. Josh came out there originally with me and my mom. And then eventually Matt moved out too. So on different times, different periods, we were all out there. And then at a whole other period, this is 3 years later, Ian, Shane, Wilson, we all moved out there again. So
wow.
So timestamp wise, January 2003, I was in Colorado for my first semester, and never seen snow in my life. I get there, the first thing that happens is they have like their worst blizzard in 50 years. So it snows, like 2 meters of snow. It's like 6.5 feet of snow, and we're snowed in. The university's closed the first week, so Josh and I are just like snowboarding off the roof and having a good time. So that was a cool thing. The campus was great. Living in Colorado was fantastic, but that I was a bit young, I think, a bit naive about how easy it would be to perform. Like I thought I would be able to perform at that level.
Performing in regards to what? Like life,
just keeping it all together. Yeah, scholastically, stress
bills.
Yeah.
What was the living situation, if you don't mind? Like, was it like you guys were all together, or were you like did you have a?
Yeah, I was with my mom for a while.
Okay.
So I lived with her for 3 months or so, and then I went to the dorms. And I met some really cool people there. So it's not like I was lonely. I wasn't scratching for, friendship.
Right.
But I wasn't ready quite to take on all the responsibility of doing the classes correctly and,
I see what you mean.
Keeping up with the stressful, the stress that comes
finding
with doing
fun,
university correctly,
finding accomplishments and paying bills. Adulting was happening.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah. So after about a year of that, I didn't do terrible in school or anything like that, but I definitely started thinking, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this, and I'm not sure it's right for me. So I left school after a year at Colorado.
Interesting.
And I had done all of my base classes of the math and physics and blah, 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 and all that stuff transferred over later. So it wasn't wasted time. But I did have a big pause, about a 4-year pause before going back to school.
This is really fascinating.
Yeah, so it was
that's like an anomaly. That's not normal for someone to take that big of a break scholastically and then and now achieve what you've achieved. So this is where did you do your 4 years hiatus?
Partly in Colorado, partly here back in Palm Coast.
Okay,
so you stayed out there another year after stopping school, and I was working at some nurseries, and then I eventually got a job at a candy factory, actually.
Really?
Yeah, in which,
Where,
Ian,
in Colorado or here?
Colorado, yeah.
Okay.
So Ian and Shane and Josh and all these guys ended up working there too later on.
You're working for Willy Wonka in Colorado.
Yeah, American Country Candies, it was called.
I love it.
So we were making the world's most expensive ribbon candy. So that was fun. I did that for a year, snowboarded like a bum,
Right.
And then we packed our bags and came back to Florida, and I was here for several years, just messing around, kicking around, working at the golf courses and things like that. And that really was an important time for me, not only to spend time with my friends, but to get the confidence back, and also to get the idea back. I have to go back to school. I'm not going to be able to achieve the things.
Was it always in the back of your head? Like,
yeah,
because you knew, and
I felt like a failure when I left.
Really?
Absolutely. I felt like, I thought I could do this. I was always, priding myself in somebody who's doing well in school. And I went out there and I just dropped the ball, and I was really depressed about that. And coming back here, I had all surrounded by great friends, but I didn't feel like I had a ton of opportunity. And so that didn't help either.
You've always known this about yourself, though, right? In a good way. You've always known that you've been like, you've always scholastically, not only as an individual, as a human, you're amazing, but scholastically, did you start to kind of like, did you forget it? Were you running from it? Or like, what was it kind of this, like, I need to get back to what I know I'm good at. And you enjoyed it, though, from my understanding. I've always known you to kind of, it wasn't it's like you had to do it. It wasn't like going to the gym. You're like forcing yourself. You enjoyed it, didn't you?
I think at the time, it's interesting to have this conversation now, because I haven't digested all of that so much, really. So I think a lot of it is that I didn't know what my plan was. And so I'm trying so hard, struggling really a lot, and thinking, why? For what? Where am I going with all this?
Right.
And so I needed to step back. And it was really important, because, all that time between not only gave me the confidence to say, you have to do this if you want to get to where you're going. And like you said, I've always had the ambitions to be, to go higher education and eventually teach, actually, which is something I've been interested in since high school. So once that started happening, I got the confidence to go back, and I started realizing I need a solid goal. And then so all the difficulty that came after that was in the interest of achieving the goal that I'd set for myself, which was PhD professor teaching. So once I had that goal in mind, then all the steps to get there made sense, and it wasn't a struggle anymore. They didn't seem like barriers that were in my way without any purpose or cause. You know what I mean? So that was really an important time for me, even if it seems like downtime. And you're right, it is a bit unusual. A lot of people who leave never go back, or people go in and they go all the way through. Or in Sweden, it's not only Sweden, but Europe, it's very common for people to not go to school directly and take a big gap, 2, 3, 4 years traveling and so on, and then go to school when you're.
Is there like a term
ready,
for that there? I know holiday is what they call for vacation, but is it it's kind of accustomed to the culture in Europe to just take that, probably like grow up a hot minute.
Yeah.
In other words,
definitely. Yeah. And see the world a bit, you know, and
Right.
get to know what you're really interested in. So that when you go to college,
become a person.
Yeah. I mean, really
Yeah.
a person who has their own interests and their own ambitions. And when you go to college, you use college to achieve those things.
Right.
College isn't something that is just supposed, you know, expected to be there because it's always been.
That's
there,
an interesting just like topic and tangent in general. As I'm obviously the whole purpose of this show is like I'm trying to become, you know, I want to be surrounded by people that are smarter than me and been through things that I haven't been. And I find it fascinating when you do, you know, this better than I do. The minute you leave the States, and nothing against the States per se, but this mentality of like, it's not sometimes that conducive to someone's happiness.
Yeah.
And it's tough. And I can look at you and I know that you've gone through things to enlighten you, because the minute you are, and it doesn't always require the removal of the United States of America. So I don't want to sound like unpatriotic, in that it can just be as easy as leaving your area code.
Yeah.
You know, like that could be really helpful. And I've noticed that. And if you haven't, you kind of stay in this, it's susceptible to be told that this is what a water bill will always be. It's not always that much. It's not always that less. So
yeah, I think you're spot on, really. I mean, my experience in Colorado, and then I lived in Indiana for a while, I lived in Tallahassee for many years. All that was just as formative in terms of my personality and who I became as moving to Sweden. Sweden was a huge thing that happened in my life, but I was a very different person once I moved there than I was prior to moving to Colorado or to Indiana or to these other places.
Well,
so
this is where things get really fun for me, is that's where we cross paths, is that not immediately. I think you had been out there for a hot minute, but when does Boda when does Sweden start to come on in the reservation mentally? Like how does that even come into play?
So I guess I could put that into kind of two different time frames. So my moving there isn't something that became a reality or even a possibility or even a thought in my mind until 2009, really. But the underlying reason of why I'm going there, which is my partner, Linnea, I met her in 2002.
Okay.
So my interest in Sweden, my love interest in Sweden, all these things started quite early.
Where did you meet her?
Flagler Beach, actually. So
no way.
Yeah, her cousin is Jenny Bergqvist, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. So
wow.
Actually, her name is Betty Kvist. If you
I never knew that this is how it began.
Yeah. So I mean, if you ever meet Jenny, she'll be embarrassed to know, but she speaks Swedish. She doesn't tell anybody that, but she
does Ed King, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yes, he does.
He's over there from what I know.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
So okay.
Anyway, so
Jenny.
I met her through Jenny, and then we kept in touch over many years. And so she lived with me in Miami for a little while, working on boats down there.
Okay.
And then I visited in Sweden in 2006, 7, 8, and 9. So I was there like 3-4 years in a row, just visiting her and enjoying myself. And then when I was graduating from Florida State University, my program mentor said, "Oh, you know, you and I are kindred spirits. It seems like, you know, you'd be really interested in this program that I went to." And the program happened to be in Sweden, and she wrote a letter of recommendation, and I got in, and then that gave me the grounds to move there. So
that's where it starts.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I was able to actually relocate in the first place. Yeah. And then from there, I finished the degree, got a job, and then was able to get residency, and then eventually my citizenship and so on.
Where do I bump into you?
You bump into me while I'm in the master's program, about halfway through. Yeah.
That story, I've literally, I'm sure if I am building what they call this thing called audience, I unfortunately probably talk about this, that just how the universe is keeps. Yeah. That was one of the most amazing, and I'm so glad I got a photo of that.
I know.
Which I'm gonna post it on this at the end, like because people are like, you should show it during the show. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but at the end of it, I'll post it on there. What a memory! Like I've told you this probably before, but that was like that moment. I was literally pissed, scared, lost, no addresses, late for work. Like my first day in Sweden, I'm at work and I'm lost, and you're like, I remember you were it was first of all the embrace and like Chad Boda, like
you said it to me. I almost like we bumped shoulders kind of, and you said me Chad, and I was like, what the hell is going on?
Well, you know, they say like when you can't hear, your eyesight gets better. When you can't, vice versa, all that. My senses were like, I was screaming for help. like not literally but figuratively, like someone, I'm lost. And then I saw you had your hoodie on and everything.
Yeah, it was
raining.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, we literally crossed, and I go, oh my, boom, you come out, you had headphones in even too, and you're like, I'm so sorry, I'm catching a train. I remember that specifically because I wanted to be like, no, but you're like, I gotta go, and I'm like, well, where do I go? And you're like, where is it? And you showed me, and you gave me the doom, and I got there. But what a magical moment, dude! And now That's your how many? So you in like your year? I don't know how this educational process works. Were you 2 years there? Is that your first year there?
Yeah, so that was after my first year. The master's program was 2 years. Right?
Gotcha.
And so maybe I can just say as details here that when I moved to Sweden in 2010, that was the last year that they had free education. Period. So anybody in the world could relocate to Sweden and get higher education for free.
Never knew.
So I got the whole master's program tuition free. But in 2011. The government in Sweden slowly but surely has been moving kind of politically right, and they implemented tuition fees in 2011, and that dramatically kind of curtailed how many people from Africa, from Latin America, from East Asia, and so on.
So you just caught it.
Just caught it, and I couldn't have afforded to relocate to Sweden. There's no way. So that was hugely important as a gateway for me to be able to access it at all, you know. And once I get in, I did everything I could to be like, hey, I want to stay here.
Yeah, when
any opportunities,
we kind of kept in touch somewhat then. After that, and I remember you taking a huge, the culture, the country, everything was starting to really become a part of who your DNA. I remember you really embraced it. You didn't. It's not like you were like, I got to get out of here. You like really, I mean, I think at that point you were pretty much even almost well versed in the language for the most part.
Yeah, it takes a while. It took me a while.
But I mean, you were in love with it, which is awesome. Yeah. And
that's true. I could taste that
by the country. Yeah, you were. And at that time, still, you're still with the missus, right? Yeah. So that had to have helped because she's there, right?
Yeah,
so,
she was supposed to come this time, but she prioritized going to Los Angeles.
She came last time with you.
She hasn't been back in a few years, but she does. She has a bunch of family here.
I've met her. Too, so. I know I've met her before. So now let's get to where you've been there. I mean, how crazy has it been already?
Yeah, it's 9 years now. Wow. So going on 10 years. Next year, it'll be 10 years.
Give me a normal day in the life now. Because when did you, I mean, I guess, are you going to be pretty much like a student for life kind of thing? Is that how this works?
Well, I'm done being a student, luckily.
Okay.
So I deal with students constantly, but I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but there isn't anywhere else to go in terms of education.
Okay.
But now it's like you start working your way up the ladder of positions. So I'm currently what they call postdoc fellow, which is like a postdoctoral researcher. And that's a pretty common position to get if you want to take a research track after you get your PhD. I know you had Brandon on here recently. Brandon does most of the teaching. He does, I mean, kind of unusually does research, which in a lot of the teaching institutes, that's not something that many people do, but Brandon still does, I think anyways. But my institute is firmly research. That's what they do.
Okay.
So when you enter an institute like that, it's almost always the case that you start off with this postdoctoral position, which means you get committed to 2-3 years working on somebody else's project.
Okay.
Somebody got a bunch of money and they need somebody to help them study it, so on and so forth. So I have that. And that gives you the opportunity to build up some experience and to apply for more money. And most people don't think about this or don't talk about it much. But once you get your PhD, you're in a very precarious job position. It's very uncommon to go directly into a full-time job.
Okay.
You're almost always going to be in a situation where every year, every other year, you're going to be reapplying for a new job through research grant money.
Really?
So you're constantly in a position where you have to seek your next job because your research grant money is going to be running out. And that happens until you get tenure, basically, which
this is like a worldwide thing, or
absolutely, yeah.
Wow,
Sweden is quite easy compared to a lot of other places. The U.S. is extremely competitive, and now they're cutting back a lot of research funding, so it's even more competitive. But it's a very precarious position to be in. But once you finally get to the end, like when you finally get tenure, you're set for life. So it's an uphill battle, but one that's worthwhile for a lot of people.
Is there kind of a magic number with tenure? Like, is it, is it always a 10-year stamp, 5 year? You know what I mean? Is there like or is it kind of always, is each person individualized with like, well, you've only been, because they changed schools. Like, is there?
Yeah, there is no proper formal standard, but it's typical for people to have something like 10 years of working experience before they start to get offered tenured jobs. Or
does it have to be at the same institution?
Not at all.
Oh,
no,
interesting.
It's even better if you have international experience.
People like that because it's like, well, you've been around.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to apply for it. So it's not like they come and say, now you're qualified for tenure. You have to send in a big application with all of your credentials compiled and all that kind of stuff. So
fascinating. Yeah. So when did
stressful?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, literally every year it's like the only thing I can relate to is like every year I got to fight for health insurance deals.
Yeah,
it's annoying. So I can that's like an elementary compared to your like livelihood
and
and this is what I believe about you, man, and I feel strongly about, and those that love you and know you dearly, is that you are such an advocate for our our Earth. Did we lose
for that beach there? I'm telling you.
Oh yeah. Yes, I know. See, we may have lost, but I don't know.
No, it's going good. I'm just pointing at the beach that I've been working hard on.
No, it froze. See?
I see.
But I think we're still good. So worst case, if it did, we're still So if you're listening and we do lose you, we are recording hard and we'll post later. But anyways,
but yeah, I mean, that stuff.
You really do care about that place.
Yeah, care about
for those that don't know, Chad was pointing to the beach that we're watching.
I can't see that.
People are like, what is he pointing at? But yeah, man, I remember you were here. Was it last year?
Yeah.
You were on fire in a good way. You know, you're really concerned. Let's I love the chronological order because we may go back to where we left off. But for a second, since we're on this, what do you think, man?
I've actually yet to tour everything up here yet. So the new construction I've been following closely. This is a big interest of mine, and I'm still in touch with Mayor Prevention and other people who are friends of mine now, as well as we've been working together for a while. So I mean, I've been studying and thinking about this for so long that none of it's surprising anymore. I think it's sad, but it's also the way that things work. The state has all this power, and they want to save this road, and so do most people. So when I first started studying this problem, I had this idea that oh, come on, just move the damn road. It's not a big deal. Right. And when you really start to understand how the community works in terms of its economics and the cultural dimensions of things like A1A and so on, that it becomes really difficult to start talking about that in any meaningful way, especially if the idea is not just to save the environment, but to do it in a way that also improves people's well-being. So this is a super complicated problem, and I think the only real way to get to a point where you could say moving the road is a good idea is if you could work with the community and get them on board with it. But right now it's not a good idea because basically everybody's against it. And I was actually talking on a radio program. I don't know if it ever aired, but the new county commissioner, Mullins, Joe Mullins.
I shared it.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a really interesting conversation. And I kept talking to them. He was saying, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea about this big renourishment project that the Army Corps has been planning, which basically they would be dumping sand all along this new construction and kind of reinforce it a bit. And I kept saying it's a good idea if they use it to prepare for something better. But if they just do that and they leave it, then of course it's a terrible idea. So I have a hard time saying kind of landing in one position or another. I always annoy people with these nuanced, well, you got to think about it like this or like that. But that's what 5 years of studying does. It makes it very difficult to land on one side or the other.
Right. Yeah. It's been as a resident and as someone that doesn't understand, more like just how that ecosystem really actually works. It's weird. It's weird, and it's obviously extremely disruptive, which that doesn't bother me as much. I know there's a lot of people complaining about it is annoying. Like they start working at 5 o'clock in the morning and they're trying to hit a due date and they're going to get a $1 million bonus, etc. But as far as the actual sustainability and what it's doing, I fought as much as I was willing to fight because I got things I got to do too to get the FDOT guy on here, whoever that guy was. And I actually did go up the totem pole and I got pretty close.
Yeah, the guy at District 5, I forget his name now. I wouldn't say it on there.
Really close. It was right there. And I had a really great discussion with a lady that was about our age, super tenacious, seemed to understand the purpose. It wasn't what do you mean a podcast? It was she got it. She had seen an episode or two. She was I don't know, just up to date with, and knew what my motive was. I didn't want to sit them down and be like, well, listen here, bucko. I wanted to really actually say what is this? Yeah. Is this actually a forever plan? But here's my naive way of looking at it, and very uneducated way, is that we got this cement. If you go now, I'm on 20th North.
Yep.
If you go just about 4 blocks more north, the extended area that they've put this white sand with the cement that's now going 30 some odd feet down, it stops. So you can see this complete drastic change in this, so you got the beach and then boom, you got this extending. But I'm wondering, it's again past my pay grade, but over time, won't the water go behind it if it's not a full secure? You know what I mean? If the moat has a break, if that's once again in layman terms, it doesn't end at a end point. It just kind of ends where they feel okay, we're done.
Yeah. The answer is a yes, absolutely.
So I am right. Absolutely. Because I was showing my wife that yesterday. We took a walk, and now I don't have a walkway. And once again, those kinds of things, it takes a lot as I'm getting older to really bother me because I just chill at peace. And I'm I don't care. I got to walk 5 blocks. So I go to my walkway, and I'm looking at the difference. And I'm but if I see, so it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be 5, 10, 50, or if we, God forbid, have a storm this year and that water is behind, won't it just,
Yeah. I don't know if you remember after Hurricane Matthew, if you walk down the South A1A section when it was all messed up.
South side. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, if they only had that small section of seawall down there in front of the Topaz.
Yep.
But that held up. And the FDOT after the storm pointed to that and said, look, it's a good idea. It worked. But if you actually went and looked at the seawall itself, exactly what you said, the water had gone behind it and worn it out. And not only that, the water in front of it dug the beach, really far down. So that's what most coastal scientists say about seawalls, why they're problematic. It's not so much the scouring at the edges, what you're saying, which is definitely a problem, but more that it causes like energy to be forced downward and causes the beach to be eroded.
Interesting.
So over time, when you put a seawall in, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose the beach in front of that seawall, especially with sea level rise.
Is that why
that's something the city doesn't think about and something the FDOT isn't really concerned about either. So over time, if you have a seawall in place, you're going to be without a beach. That's pretty much
like the only thing I'm thinking right off the top of my head is like that, under the Lions Bridge or whatever in St. Augustine, and the intercoastal literally like meets that water, the wall, and then that's it. Yeah. Or the intercoastal and the houses that are, that's what we're pretty much can expect, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's not like, maybe, it could happen in the future. That stuff happens all the time and has been happening, for many, many years. So Miami, for example, didn't have any beaches in the 1940s because they put seawalls up. And before they had good technology to bring a bunch of sand back in and re-nourish the beaches, Miami was without beaches. You can look up aerial photos.
I didn't know this.
Yeah. And that's because they had, seawalls right on the beach, and a storm would come and wash the beach away, and they had no way of putting it back. But now, they ship in sand from the Bahamas and rebuild the beach. So
what's your opinion on why? Let's get a little Patrick Kelly with it. Here would be a reason why I would feel like they went so fast with this resolution is it so like we hired a company to fix the issue. They're obviously not government agency that we hired.
Yeah.
There was a grant and or some kind of funding that's now allocated to pay company A. Do you think it's a safe thing to say, or is it too conspiracy theory to think that the company that could have potentially been hired, and maybe not even in this immediate situation, but the company that got hired is in bed with the people that are making the decisions and getting these, or is that just too cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs?
There is a formal process for like bidding on these projects. So the FDOT is required. It sounds like such a nerd right now. I'm sorry.
No,
but the FDOT is required to actually put out bids in a situation that's not an emergency. If it's an emergency, like when they had 2004, a bunch of hurricanes came and they had to put that seawall in.
Right.
They didn't have to ask anybody about that. They gave it to the closest contractor. No questions asked. But that's in the law. Also, it says in an emergency situation you do this. But without an emergency situation, they're supposed to put it out there. How that bidding happens behind the scenes is another question, right? So I would never suggest that there is no possibility of backdoor, deals.
Right.
I think that happens a lot, particularly in Florida. But Florida is also one of the places where we have some of the best like transparency laws of any state, actually, called the Sunshine Law, which means that any decision that's made publicly or made by public officials has to have more than two people in the room and has to be publicly recorded and publicly available. So most of the things that actually do happen, you can dig up in 2 seconds and go and write a report on it if you want. So that's a good thing that helps control some corruption. But there's also no doubt that people like Rick Scott, who was running the state for a very long time, had his business favorites. He himself is a businessman and had built his career in real estate and so on. And you don't get that far without having connections, and you don't get funded to be, I think he ended up having, I don't know how many $100 million in his campaign. That money doesn't come from nowhere, right? So money in politics is a real thing. And I would never for a second suggest that it doesn't reach all the way down into Flagler Beach.
Right.
I don't know anything too particularly about that.
Me neither.
But the incentive for the $1 million incentive, that's to make the project, like to incentivize them to fix it quick. And that looks politically kind of good for the governor in particular.
Right.
Because if you remember after Hurricane Matthew, Rick Scott did the same for Southside.
He did.
He said, finish it up and you get $1 million.
I think they got it, right?
Yeah, they did.
Here's what's interesting is that is it okay to still, is it safe to call you a scientist too? Is that applicable?
Yeah. That's what
being a scientist, and as we're learning how this world goes round, and every place and every little country and or county has its own rhythm, are you finding it to be, does it consume you mentally when you start to say like, okay, let's just say Chad Boda's idea, maybe concept, maybe passion is beach erosion, and you start to go down that rabbit hole and you have solutions and you want to, once again, you just want to bring it into discussion. Maybe you don't have a solution, but you say, we got to talk about this. Has it happened? And, or do you see where all of a sudden you're going to be met with that kind of like that door that's locked and there's no key, where you're like, hello, who's there? And that door is being locked by a government agency, so to speak. Have you found that yet? Has that happened?
Yeah. I mean, but I know why. That's an important difference. I think that it's not like, I mean, I would never be in a situation now with what I understand with Flagler that, oh, I think this is a really good idea, and then try to present it and they say, I'm not interested. And you say, why?
Right.
What I have been able to do is understand why they're not interested, and why something like relocation or any talk about climate change and so on is unappealing to people at the state level. It's cost them a lot of money. You know, they have a large voting constituency that doesn't believe in any of that stuff.
Right.
So, you know, I understand it, and I actually don't think ever that if I handed over a solid report that they're just going to do it.
Right.
So what I'm really working with now, I actually applied for money for this, is to start to work with the city on how they can put this in motion. And that starts with
our city?
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
So this is, I mean, it's in the pipeline, so
it's
not guaranteed to happen or anything like that. But I've applied for money to kind of push the idea forward, because a lot of it is not just convincing the commission that this needs to happen. I mean, they've known that for 20 years.
Right.
You know, the problem is having those hard conversations with the citizens to say, listen, there is going to be some major changes that have to happen. How can we do this in a way that doesn't destroy people's lives? You know,
right.
And that has to do with things like infrastructure relocation,
right.
All the housing along the waterfront here. In 50 years, the idea is that those houses are not going to be habitable anymore. We need to start saying at some point, right. What are we going to do when we find ourselves in a situation where people can't live here anymore? And there are places in the world that are planning like that, you know, long-term planning that says, hey, once we have this many catastrophes in a year, then we're going to make that place, right. You know, abandoned and start.
Is there an example that you have, like, that you're seeing, like, hey, look, like, for instance, another barrier island, whether it's in the United States or somewhere, that actually is saying, look, there's no more fun and games here. We have to, even though it's not on the horizon,
yep.
But we have to evacuate. Even though it's so fascinating that you are passionate about something that may not happen in your lifetime. It's almost guaranteed not to happen in your lifetime, excluding a super catastrophe.
Yeah.
But it is super passionate, because I think not only as a society, but as a consumer, we're not living in a way that we care about tomorrow,
yeah.
I think there's becoming more educated people, but we don't consume because we care about tomorrow. Yeah. We may care about our immediate children,
yeah.
But we're not thinking about like 5 lineages out.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you are, and you don't seem to be, and I've known you pretty much my whole life. You seem to keep it pretty even keel without going, like, losing it, because it is kind of like it's never going to be not an uphill battle. I mean, you must feel at times you're on a treadmill, figuratively speaking.
Yeah, I mean, we very cynically joke all the time that things like climate change or job security, you know, but I mean, it's depressing. It is. But, you know, in a place like Flagler, it can be really frustrating to talk to people who say, you know, I love the beach so much, that's why I'm here. And then they're like, but I absolutely cannot live in a city that has A1A somewhere else. And you're like, but those things are incompatible. You can't have both. And people are reasonable, right? But those conversations never happen. And people are genuinely, you know, caring about where they live. That's not a surprise either.
Right.
So I find a lot of hope in that there are possibilities for change, but we need to put the hard work into, I mean, I'm not a community organizer by any means,
right.
But there are people who are very powerful at that, and it works. Community organizing works, and it has worked, you know, for African-American communities in particular for many, many years, to empower them when they don't have the power currently. Right. And I think that something like Flagler Beach needs to be empowered to be able to make these more difficult, but also kind of more long-term and more sustainable decisions.
Right.
But currently they don't have the financial means, they don't have the administrative ability, and they don't have the support from their own citizens. And that is, I mean, you're stuck at that point. So for me, it's, you know, I find a lot of confidence in the potential, because I know that the potential is there. I don't feel like, oh, it's totally screwed. Right. But I also understand the gravity of the situation and how difficult it'll be to get there. And that is a bit overwhelming sometimes. I mean, just to kind of give you some context, the university recently released a report about student mental health, and students from our program seek mental health advice from the university at like twice the rate of other programs.
Really?
And it's because they're being bombarded by the problems constantly,
right?
You know, and we try to tell them understanding the problems is the first step to solving those problems,
right.
And that's empowering. It shouldn't be depressing, but, you know, easier said than done. So
I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe some of the method to your madness in your piece maybe would be, I've said this a few times now because it was taught to me, and it went viral online a while back, but it was like, if you want to change the world, start by making your bed. And I feel like it really, I mean, I think it resonated with hundreds of millions of people, hence it went viral, but it's true. And like you said, you get a lot of people that let's take something that's really something of a big pet peeve of mine is like still people that go to SeaWorlds and any kind of captivity of mammals that are more intelligent than us. And we still see people, especially here being in Florida, everyone and their mothers are still going. Yeah. I find it hard to not make a comment, even just like, and I don't want to get into the point of like blackfish is what changed my life, one of those things, but blackfish could have been the catalyst of just saying, well, let me look into this. And then you do find out how they're sold, how they're kept. And then you educate and then you understand. But here's what I find interesting, and to circle back about maybe why you're at peace, is that I'm just taking care of my backyard. I educate, those that ask me, I'll tell. Like, so I don't go out and bash in the SeaWorlds and the marine lands and you want to go, do your thing. Yeah. I see the post. Sometimes I'll screenshot it, send it to a friend, and I go, why? It's still happening. But I won't be the guy that's like trolling these people. But what I will do is that if someone asks me if they want me to go, I would say politely, no thanks. And if they say, why not? I'll say, this is why. Yep. Maybe you didn't think about this. But I can't control it. I was losing my marbles for a hot minute in the last year's hurricane, or I'm losing them now. Matthew. I think it was Matthew.
Matthew was 2016, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
And we had a bunch of people come in after, and it became like a spectacle. And maybe
that was Irma. It was Irma that flooded out. Everybody was looking at all the trash.
So we had a huge,
I remember that.
Huge population of people coming in just to see it. Yeah. And then they're walking over the dunes. And those that know me really well knew that I was that old man yelling at you to get off the lawn. I literally was posted up at the Blue Topaz at the Island Grill, hanging out, having a couple libations. And the amount of people, bro, was just literally like, and I got a little mad and I was an idiot. And I learned that even just then how much I've grown since then. Yeah. I can't do it anymore. Yeah. And I felt, not to get like spiritual with it, but I believe in the guy upstairs. I remember feeling just at one night of being frustrated that it's their earth too. And if you want to live in that, and you have a lot of same people that are like, I want the world to be a better place, and they flick their cigarette butt on their front yard. So, hey man, unfortunately, it may not be your front yard. It could be my yard too. But point is it safe to say that you've learned how to just kind of educate, teach, take care of yourself and your immediate lane, and those that you can't? I mean, I'm sure it's got to rip your heart out when you see somebody hurting the ecosystem to some capacity. But have you kind of put the?
No, I don't think so. I mean, at least I hope not.
Okay.
So I've made up my mind about these things. Like, I know what I believe. A lot of people disagree with me, which is fine. But I also.
Can you give me an example of something what people disagree with you?
I mean, I have very strong feelings about how much we should be taxing people who have a lot of wealth and where that money should go, for example. And
that's more than just all that
okay. That has to start there. And then you have enough money for environmental management, right? And then you have enough money for education and research and all these other things. So I start there anyways with dealing with the big problems we have with,
You're met with a lot of apprehension with that?
Not in Sweden. Here, it's fine. Right. I'm happy to have a debate about it, which is no problem. But I mean, when it comes to saying, I know what I believe, and I hope that people do it, and I'm just going to kind of not see what they're doing. That's something that I think I was prone to that earlier on, but I've learned slowly but surely that, the only way to ever convince people is to meet them where they are and not be like, why don't you believe what I believe? Why don't you just all of a sudden become a socialist or something like that, something ridiculous? And nobody's going to make that leap. So to ask them, where are you actually? Have a conversation with them, listen to what they have to say, even if you think it's ridiculous. I've had conversations where I'm saying, Jesus, this person is, they don't know what they're talking about. But you have to listen and you have to say, okay, why do you believe that? And try to work your way through dialogue and through some intentional understanding, to point out things that might be problematic with what they're saying, right? And I have very little tolerance for scientists that come and say, bow before the knowledge within this book. This is the thing you should be doing. And we call it scientism in our class, where we teach students like that's the exact opposite of what you should do. Say, I learned a bunch, and now you need to listen to me.
Right.
People rightfully so turn directly away from that. Right. So I think that's a super big problem. And another super big problem is to come in and suggest like you need to all of a sudden change these things in your lives super dramatically. Like, you've been eating McDonald's every day. Now you need to start drinking kale juice. And it's like, well, maybe not, right? Maybe we could start talking about how reducing a little bit of consumption of certain things is important. And by doing that and doing it communally, by saying, hey, let's work together on that. Right. You start to understand that the problem is a mutual problem. You start to understand that you and others have to do it together. I get frustrated at the idea that it's each individual's responsibility to solve the big environmental problems of the world. I would never say that individuals don't have responsibility. but it's a collective responsibility, and that collective effort has to be, it has to be a collective effort. It can't be a bunch of individuals acting alone,
right?
Because the problems are at higher levels that individuals don't have access to, right? And that's what I'm talking about. Communities getting together, arguing with the state. Individual people doing that are never going to be effective,
right?
And even if they have the biggest heart in the world and all the good intentions, right? So I think that that us as scientists to say, hey, the world needs to change. We need to start by saying, where are you? Where do we need to go? What possibilities are there for getting us there in a way that you will find accessible and acceptable, right? And that's a really difficult thing to do, because it might mean accepting positions on all kinds of things that you don't agree with.
Right.
But if they can provide you with the means to reach milestones that are actually making progress, then I'm all for it. So it's kind of pragmatism in a way, but
does it be, I mean, what I'm extracting is, I mean, it sounds like it just becomes a lifestyle, man. It's got to be a lifestyle. It can't be a hobby.
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah, you have to internalize it.
Yeah.
You have to live the value. You have to build the values and then live them. Well, that's without a doubt.
And I'm
but
learning.
That comes, that's not only picking up trash. That's not only watching the turtles. That's going to meetings.
Mm-hmm.
That's supporting your community. That's volunteering. All those things come together with being a good and well-informed citizen. You know what I mean? So my main point is to keep it so that it's not people focused only on themselves,
right?
But they focus on themselves and others and try to make the community improve. You know what I mean?
It's funny because, like, as we're talking, like, taking care of the earth is so similar to just like running a healthy lifestyle. I had a really great meeting today with a woman I knew for nothing, and our relationship is evolving well when it comes to business. And I'm like, I literally only could have happened because I prayed for it. So the point is like, it came from just treating people the way I would want to be treated and some. And she literally like told me that today verbatim.
Yeah.
She's like, the only reason I'm working with, because everyone and their mothers are interneters and any industry. Josh is here. We're gonna let him in.
Sure.
Come on, David. We're live. Okay. Go ahead. You'll be on, but don't,
sit over here if you want to be out, I guess.
I don't know what they can. Here, I'll show you what they see. There you go.
Oh, let's see it.
Josh Boda. Hi, Josh. Make yourself at home, whatever you want. But isn't it kind of the irony of, as you're like, I'm listening to you, it's just so powerful. What you're talking about has to do with like just living good.
Yeah.
But I really am like, this is, I don't get to see you often. And my opinion of you right now is absolutely, truly, I'm really proud of you, man. Like, you have a lot of people that are involved in situations that you can't, I mean, it's probably a very fair statement, even though you have hope in humanity, which is awesome. That's one thing that I do too. And I extracted that from a lot of listening to people like Elon Musk's and the Joe Rogans, and people that are just like, there is hope, people. Like, don't get jaded where you're just like, screw the world and I'm, like going AWOL here. But there is really the light that you're looking at is very, very, very dim. I mean, it's got to be keyhole dim.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's even that,
very, very dismal.
like, you don't every day you wake up and what you're fighting for. This isn't something like, we're not on the cusp of, like, how excited I am. Like, there's these little achievements that we've made here in our little town. The straw, we're getting very, the straw free thing, the reusable, like all those things are great. But like you said, that's just now we've got to go to. What are some things right now that you wish, or do you think, I want to use the word easy, but what are some things that you think as an average American citizen that people could start to do, or even just a human perspective could start to do that would change the mindset, get involved community-wise? Like, what are some things that...
Yeah, I think the first thing you said, get involved community-wise. I mean, I work with a lot of people who would originally suggest, eat less meat, fly less. They're talking about how you can reduce your carbon footprint, not, contribute to climate change. But I find it much more effective to say, what can you do at home, right? What can you do in your backyard? Well, first, you can stop throwing your trash out the window. I mean, these are small things, right? But I think it's much more effective to ask people to improve the place where they live and not, a super abstract problem. And it's not to not talk about the big abstract problems, but they're related, right? If you push your city to support better public transit, then you need to drive less, and all that stuff leads to carbon emission reductions. And I mean, so there are linkages between these things. But I think it's really ineffective to focus on the really abstract issues and not the local ones. So my first thing would be, are you informed about what's going on in your town? I did a survey here in Flagler Beach in 2014, And I mean, the big problems in the city, things like beach erosion, the Army Corps project, which is, the city's committing $50 million to this thing.
Right.
95% of the people said they never heard of it.
Right.
Right. So there's a level of uninformedness, whatever we call it, a level of ignorance, if you will, that is not self-imposed necessarily. Right. So working with the city was, hey, aren't you concerned that the citizens are unaware of the project that you're dedicating this money to? And so don't you want to be more effective in outreach?
Right.
And so these are things that I think both the city and elected officials and citizens themselves can do. Am I adequately informed? Am I actually, would I stand behind the policies and the projects that are currently going on in the city? And if not, who else is on my side, and how can we try to be involved in the discussion that can improve this, So small things, that can lead to really big improvements in your well-being as well. I think picking up trash and things like that are definitely useful.
Right.
But I really think that, especially in a place like Flagler Beach, there aren't major problems with air pollution and other kinds of issues like that. So a lot of it is just about making sure that you inform people if you see them abusing the beach. Not to say, damn it, you asshole, get out of here. Excuse my language.
No,
you can't say that. But you can say, do you know that is something that's really problematic?
Right.
Try to explain to them in a way that isn't penalizing them. You see what I mean? At least initially. And then we also need to be very, very strict in enforcing the rules once people break them willingly. You know what I mean?
It's tough though.
It is, especially the face-to-face stuff. I'm not good at that at all.
Dude, I'm on like, my piece is intact, but I'm still, so for instance, on a normal day, you take within a group of, you can't walk by at least 10-ish people that aren't like throwing something.
Yeah.
And it's most of the time cigarette butts on, and it is what it is. I get it. But it's so weird because the other day, this was last summer, I'm walking up. They're actually 2 European ladies, really good looking too. So it didn't hurt to go up to them. But I said, I'm so sorry. I go, but do you mind if I just pick them up? Because they had, by this time, I was doing like an hour swim, and I come in and out. And there was like a mound, and I'm like, so I walked up. I had actually got like a bag that was on the top of the trash. It was like a Publix bag or something. And I walked over, I said, don't mind me. I do. And they're like, oh, we were going to throw them out. And I'm like, I got you. But it would end up turning into, I still see them to this day, and they're nice to me.
Okay.
But I didn't learn, I wasn't the first, I had it kind of like evolved into how to go about doing it. Sure. And that obviously every situation is unique to itself. Not all of them put them by the side and this, but point is, it is tough, and I'm guilty. My wife knows this. It's really, for instance, the people leaving the dogs in the car situation, man, that's a whole nother one. That one I can't walk by. That happens I'm like cursed that I have to see it. And I always say something but I am learning that there's a way of going about it, but also to not letting it rob your peace and your happiness, which I think you're doing a really good job at. Because there's probably, would you say there's a larger population of people that are involved in like you said, that are seeking counsel because they're raging, that are like, man, another sperm whale died because of 16, pounds of plastic was in their stomach, which just came out. I'm sure you saw.
I did see that, yeah.
Are there people that are like raping and pillaging because of that? Or are there more, are you the norm?
It depends on where you are, man. I mean,
guess that's true.
I live in a very different place right now.
Right.
So our students are like very kind of radical. They think like, let's go out and stop the oil industry right now. And what we need to try to do is say, you have to understand how things work before you can go and do something like that. So we're going to try to teach you that. And so I'm surrounded constantly by people who are, super gung ho and, just saying, just tell me what to do and I'll go do it because it's such a big problem. I need to solve it right now. And then here, it's not that you find people who are, I don't know. Here, you find people who are very concerned, but you're more likely to run into somebody who just literally doesn't care at all. And that's a really difficult situation too. But there are different kinds of problems. So people who are gung-ho and want to go do something right now, that's great. But if they just go and do something, they're usually going to be alienating lots of people. And a great example of this, a bunch of our students recently tried to organize a protest against car use in a city. And they basically blocked traffic with a big sign that said, sorry to annoy you, but we're trying to save the world. And of course, everybody that saw that sign just thought, what a bunch of assholes.
Right.
What a bunch of inconsiderate people. So it's my fault. I'm trying to go pick up my kid from school and you're going to block me now because of, what? I'm on your side. And now I'm been trapped in your, attempt to try to solve the problem.
Right.
So that's a really big issue.
That just happened not too long ago?
Just like 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Wow.
And, our students are proud of themselves for that.
And this was in Sweden.
Yeah, this was in Sweden.
Wow.
And we try to tell them how do you know that that was useful? I mean, you probably just made a lot of people care even less about the problem that you're trying to solve. And I think that that's just as big of a problem as people who don't care at all, because both of those people have to learn something about the way the world actually works and try to meet somewhere in the middle. Because, you know, none of us can escape the reality of the environmental problems, right? But we can't expect people to do them on our terms and through our values. Right. So it has to be an open-minded dialogue, right? And I think that new values form in those conversations.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of people get annoyed and say, yeah, but that's not, what do I do now, though?
Right.
And it's like, you start talking to your neighbor, right? You start talking to your neighbor, you start saying, hey, man, let's go and pick up some trash together on the beach. Lund Provincial organizes these trash pickups twice a month. Join that if you want to help improve your community, right? I do feel obligated to say something. My colleagues would hate me if I didn't. If you are listening to this and you're interested in reducing your personal climate footprint, there are 3 main things you can do. One of which is reduce your meat consumption, which is very, very effective. Another is use public transit more often, which in Flagler County is not a great opportunity or option.
Right.
And then another one that a lot of people say that I don't agree with very much is consider having fewer children. And that's a very controversial thing that several people at my institute have been pushing, and I find it to be a very uncomfortable thing and not a very effective one. But that is something that has been widely spread through the researchers at my institute, and I feel like I should say it because I haven't been talking about that, and that's not my thing. But if you are interested in that, these are things that have been kind of pointed at. Hey, if you want to immediately start doing it, cut your meat consumption, cut down on your driving, and consider having a smaller family.
Well, you bring up a really good point about this all wraps up into education and educating yourself and knowing how long is it going to take to get something done. And here's my hypothesis. We as a society, more state-based than anything, are continually being bred for instant gratification, whether it's a like, a share, a meal, a friend, no matter what, phone call, etc. And it's not getting better. So if for instance, I brought this up in another episode. Have you heard of dark restaurants yet?
No, but I think I get the point already from the name, but go on. Explain.
Restaurants that don't have a brick and mortar, serve food, but use Uber Eats to deliver it. Save half your costs. They're learning from, they're not getting my point is that things are faster. Now, these are facts. If you're educating yourself and you are an advocate for less, let's just say the petroleum industry. Okay. Let's go over some of the facts. Now, I didn't know this. I didn't come up with this, but I wanted to maybe, I'm going to lessen my footprint, my carbon footprint. Well, here are the facts from what I was educated with. If today were the last day that the last car was manufactured that required that kind of fuel, we're still 50 years out until that last car probably croaks. Fact.
Yep.
Give or take.
Very true.
Okay. So now if I educate myself, instead of going out there and stopping traffic on I-4, I know that we're still 50 years out. I'm 30 nothing. I'm 90. Before it even becomes. So why don't I educate that? And then why don't I also take my own steps and not only spreading the education, but lessening my carbon footprint by my own vehicle and expediting that 50-year process to now the Tesla. Well, I don't care what it is. Do something. But I bet you there's a huge population of people, including myself, that didn't know. Wow, I didn't think about that. Last car were to be made today. We're still 50 years out until everyone almost in the world, if this was a global thing, that last car is gone. So it's fascinating that it kind of changes your mindset, I would imagine. Is it fair to say that those that are on I-4 that are like, stop, and you're like, man, we're still 50 years out until that last car is done. Is it true? Like, is that really, that's how I'm starting to understand how to make myself sleep better, because I, thank God, don't have too much direct communication with people that are not aware of the situation. You know, like I don't really hang out with too many people that like do actually still go to SeaWorlds and do like just things that are just so atrocious to me. It's not in my immediate nucleus group anymore. But I haven't had like a disagreement with someone that's like, yeah, absolutely, McDonald's is great. You know what I mean? Like I don't have that.
Generally accepted. Right. They're problematic. Yeah, I see what you mean.
But I'm sure, as you know, because you're just, is there a country and or a place that you see right now that you kind of are, it's kind of like the beacon for that's like through your research and through your travels that you're like, man, this little area and or this country is doing a really good job at XYZ, that you've seen that is like something that those that are listening could start researching and looking into and like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, like, of course, I'm going to say Sweden is one of the leaders in environmental policy and kind of their ambitions for carbon reductions and these kinds of things. But there's also places in the U.S. that do great work. I mean, just to stick closer to home, we've had for the last 3-4 governors people who were openly climate change deniers, right? Rick Scott even wouldn't allow state employees to use the words climate change in any official documents. Like, that was one of their internal policies. So even in an environment where the people at the top of government of the state are saying this is not an issue we're concerned with,
right?
Southern governments in Miami-Dade County and in Broward County and in several other counties that are, directly and physically exposed to the problems that the state can ignore, have formed their own coalitions. It's called the Southeast Florida Climate Change Compact.
Okay.
And they have amongst themselves organized like what areas are most vulnerable. How can we pool money to have insurance policies for avoiding that? How can we start to talk about relocation, or even very interestingly and importantly, how can we make sure that the poor communities who currently live on the highest land, because that has always been the most undesirable land, how can we make sure they're not going to get pushed out by big real estate developers who know that high land is going to be really high value in 50 years?
Right.
So they're already putting policies in place to try to curb the disasters that are coming. And another thing I think is, so this was a bit of a different point that you had mentioned. So I guess that's really good. California is another place that a lot of people point out is really progressive, but Florida has a lot. There's a long way to go.
Have you seen I keep seeing videos of it, and I try to always be someone before I talk about something to know about it. So disclaimer, I know nothing about this, but I've seen recently videos, and I'll show you later. That's happening here in our backyard in the marshes. Something's going on. Have you heard about this?
Yeah,
yet?
it's a restoration project. Yeah, it's marsh restoration.
Is that because the videos are they look rather barbaric.
Yeah, they are. I mean, that's always the case. So I don't want to piss anybody off. So this was a big controversy here in the city. So I know a lot of people didn't want it, especially fishermen and so on. And it's being funded, if I remember correctly, by the St. Johns County or the St. Johns Water Management District.
Okay.
But what it is wetland restoration. So they built that canal, and when they built that canal, they did a lot of like dumping of the sand on the sides, and it created a lot of blockage in what would normally be coastal kind of mangrove habitat. And so what they're doing is they're restoring that. In order to restore that, you have to break up all those old sand piles, and that's why they have the backhoes out there and stuff. And it is brutal. I was actually involved myself in a restoration project in Ecuador a long time ago in 2008. And the first thing they did was give you a machete. And I'm like, I thought we were here to save the environment. And they're like, yes, saving the environment starts with murdering everything that's there right now, because it's not supposed to be there. It was all invasive species. And we just started by hacking it back. And I worked 2 months doing that, busting my ass, hacking the stuff back, thinking, there's no end to it. And what they do when you leave that program, the last day they bring you to the other side of the mountain where they have restored it. The last 30 years, and you start to see, it's possible. Right. And I've been contributing to that. So
it's like we're unprogramming ourselves physically.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what's happening back here, I think a lot of people, especially fishermen, have over the years gotten used to what's there. And they said, I know exactly where the fish are. You're not going to screw that up for me. And I understand that. And I think that actually St. John's probably really dropped the ball in terms of their interaction with the community.
Communication.
Yeah. So
people are raging online. Here in Flat. Of course, this isn't going to be on Reddit's front page, but this is every time I get on Facebook, there's a lot of people here locally, all names that you would know, just local residents have been here for a hot minute, and they are fuming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so glad I asked you before because I wanted to rape and pillage online too and be like, wow, because the backhoes are there's who knows what's in the backhoe and the birds, that's what people are saying is the current life, which sucks. But so for those that don't know that they are listening, so that this is it's actually a restoration project to actually break up what was not supposed to be there from the beginning because of the growth that took place from what was blocked.
That's right. In order to restore two things. So the coastal mangrove, which has like red, black, and yellow mangroves in it. And that's all, everybody who's ever been in a boat on the canal side of Flagler knows what that looks like.
Right.
And also the salt marsh on the far side.
Interesting.
And it's without a doubt, those ecosystems, because everybody wants to live on barrier islands. Go to Daytona Beach and look for a mangrove.
Not happening.
Right. Yeah. So these are actually super threatened all over Florida. Right. Some of the most threatened, actually. So when I heard that they were doing that, I was like, that's great.
Right.
And then I heard what was happening in the city, and you say, oh, okay, they really screwed that up.
Yeah.
Because if you can work with fisher people and say, hey, you know a lot about this place, help us understand how we can do this more effectively. Right. Instead of saying, we're just going to do this, deal with it, which is more or less how it
is scary because I guess if me, I'm guilty as charged. I saw it online and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know if they were building a Burger King or I didn't know what was going on, but this is very interesting. Something I was just thinking about too is, do you have your research and a lot of your studies, are they ever concentrated on actual like marine life, or like the actual like the animals and things,
specific
the species, or is it more of just kind of, or you know what I mean? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, no, I don't deal with explicitly with particular species. No. So I deal more, I'm a social scientist, so I deal more with like policy and management systems. So the environment matters a lot, because if you're going to have a good management system, it has to match the environment you're trying to manage, or of course. And that's a big problem with Flagler Beach, right? You have this barrier island that's supposed to be shifting around, and you just put a seawall in the middle and it screws everything up.
Right.
So I have a lot of ecological knowledge necessarily in order to explain these problems and so on. But my major focus is the social issues.
Interesting.
Yeah, the policy issues, the power issues, the conflicts that arise because of that. And I'm really become more and more interested over time in kind of what we call collective action, which is how individual people who have no power can get together and become very powerful, and try to force changes at higher levels like the state level or whatever. So my work has expanded quite a lot since I finished my PhD in Flagler. So now I'm working on 2 other projects that bring me to Africa and to Indonesia and to a lot of other places. So that's a whole new world has been opening up, but it's still connected in the same way that I'm looking at the social side of environmental management.
It's amazing, man. I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, it's ongoing. I mean, especially this new stuff. So I got money last year with a friend of mine, a Swedish colleague, that we're going to be looking at farmer organizations in sub-Saharan Africa. Wow. People who are, struggling to even have enough food on the table and trying to make political changes, but they have no political power. So you get a bunch of different farmers who build organizations, and they try to lobby through those organizations. Right. So we're going to study that a bit. And I'm also beginning a new project now looking at the impacts from climate change on disadvantaged communities. So poor communities, African-American communities, women, these kinds of things, and how they get affected more when these disasters happen because of the way that the social system works. And this is particularly problematic in like Africa, for example, where men control all the money in the family. Right. They own all the assets. And when all of that shit gets busted from a big hurricane or something, they take all that money and go to the city and leave their family. I mean, of course, that's not always what happens, but that's a problem because of the ownership structures and so on. And because of the culture and the lack of obligation to stay with families, that's in some countries is a major problem. And so we're trying to understand, when climate change becomes more and more of an issue, how are all these existing inequalities going to become worse because of these problems? That's a major issue.
Super trippy, deep like rabbit hole, though.
It is.
Because I had a finance guru on not too long ago, and I never had thought about it in this context, but it's obviously a fact that even in the States here, that women are not, the pay rate and all that is that's the easy thing. That's the easy thing to understand. No one can really dispute that. Yeah. But here's what was more fascinating from this finance guy. He goes, you know what I think? He goes, I think if from a global perspective, if women were allowed, I don't know what the right term would be, allowed and or nurtured or given the opportunity of how many breakthroughs in science we would have and health. And this, I was like, mind blown. And this is what I love about this little show is that here, this guy is thinking beyond how it affects his, his sister's, mother's, cousin's pay. Is that, here are these women in maybe another country that screw the pay. They're not even given the opportunity to say something. Yeah. And they may have the opportunity to share. Imagine if like there's a woman, he believes, which I can't really disagree with him. He believes that women could be the breakthrough to some of the biggest diseases, ailments, issues that we face, not only from a physical perspective, but even just like like the actual health perspective, but the world. Yeah. I thought, wow, fascinating. Isn't it? Did you ever think about it like that?
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely the case. Not only that women and girls all over the world have a harder time, even in the most advanced countries. Even in Sweden, there's a major pay gap. I mean, this is a country that people look at as like the most equal country in the world. Maybe Iceland's one level up, and it's true, but there's still the problems there too. You know what I mean? But I mean, so I think that's absolutely a problem, and I think it's something that is on the agenda of the United Nations and all these big development programs, right? But the problems that we see here in terms of pay gap are exacerbated to the max in developing countries, right? So in a lot of places I have, if I can touch on a subject that maybe people are uncomfortable with, but is extremely important. One of my colleagues works with menstruation in Africa. And so menstruation in Africa and in India and many other places is like a serious taboo, right? So there's not even a word for it in the language in Tanzania that she studies, right? Wow. Because it's such a taboo thing. So when girls menstruate, they are either forced out of the community into some kind of house, or they're forced to hide it. For many of them, when it first happens, they've never ever heard of menstruation and they're freaked out. They think they're going to die. They can't get access to any products. And not only that, because they can't get access to products and because of all these problems, they miss school, they don't get proper education. Right. All these problems pile up, all because they're rejected because of their natural, physical, processes. And so what she's working with is to show not only, hey, empower these women and they will become the next generation of entrepreneurs and so on, but by not doing so, they have to use all kinds of, random products in order to deal with their menstruation problems. And they throw those in the toilet, and it costs $150 million every year just to plug up that one village, to unplug it every year. So she's showing them, like, your abuse of these women is not only ruining their lives, but it's costing tons of money and destroying the local economy. And what are you doing? So help them a little bit. And that's actually the gender issue is something that with the new Sustainable Development Goals is one of the central issues to try to reduce that problem. And I have some colleagues that are really championing amazing projects, not only around education, but around breaking down these traditional power structures that have kept women in a position where they're not able to flourish. Right. Even exactly like you said, where they have not only the ability, but often, insight that we lack. Right. That is super important for solving major problems beyond just health issues and so on. So yeah.
I've actually heard of this by consequence of, I think we all as a human species love to read shit when we're taking a shit. And I was reading some shit the other day, and it was my wife's thingies, whatever they call them, the pads or whatever. Yeah. And she loves to try to buy the stuff that's good for the environment, like that. So anyways, in the back of this package I was educated with that issue. And these pads supposedly are like Tom's shoes. The Tom Shoe movement that started a few years ago for every pair of shoes. This particular pad company, whether she bought it for this purpose or not, I don't know. So I'm not trying to talk her up. It could have been unbeknownst to her, but she bought these. I'm reading it, and it said there's a huge issue. Now, I don't think it highlighted specifically what country or what area, but it's so crazy how this. And of course, you say Me Too now, and that's what. Just like you said, it's like stopping traffic on I-4. It's not really educating. It's just a cool hashtag now, and it doesn't really describe what's happening.
Yeah, so it had a lot of significance. I agree now. I think now it's definitely it's been muddled down a lot. But originally, I think it had a lot of.
The motive was pure, I think, in the beginning, but now, just like with anything, commercialization of it is now. It's like you put it's like the Christian fish on a business card. 10 years ago would like, oh wow, they'll treat me right. When it's like, no, they found the gap. But point is, it's a very big deal, and it's so crazy how here, like the craziest thing about it is the $150 million a year to fix a plumbing situation, and that's when you get the attentions of the powers that be.
Absolutely,
when they're like, wait a minute, that's where that money's going. You know what I mean? Yeah. And even though that money should still then be given to some other kind of appropriate needs, but that's another issue in itself. But it's really crazy how, I mean, man, I had a guy on the show like 3 or 4 episodes ago. And all he kept saying was education. Not even from a cliche standpoint, like education, read a book. It was more like, I could tell, I was just assuming what people may have been picking up from that. But what I picked up from it was, it's just about learning. Yeah. How long is it going to take to get something fixed? How to get it fixed? How does it affect you negatively? How does it affect you positively? And what you could do to become part of the problem. I mean, the solution and not the problem. But I don't know, man. It's really fascinating. Would you say, is there something right now on like the scroll of Chad that's more important than other, like right now, my top 3 of like my, something that you're advocating for, fighting for that is a part of your DNA right now more than others? Or is it kind of all in a combination of one category, just out of curiosity?
Yeah. I mean, I think about it as a combination in many ways. I think so. I can say that something that I find as an American citizen and somebody from the US, I have a lot of concern about individualism in this country. And I think that there needs to be a revival of a more communitarian understanding of Americans, right? So we're very, and people are probably gonna hate me for this, but we're very kind to each other openly, kind of in the streets, and it's a bit of a shallow politeness, which is fine. But when it comes to like caring for people, your immediate circle is there, but why do I care about Joe Schmo who lives in Daytona? He's not my problem. Right. And that mentality, I think, is dangerous because it removes the incentive to support policies that will allow everybody to flourish. And when everybody flourishes, you say it again, everybody flourishes, of course, right? But if a bunch of people are suffering, then that suffering carries over into everybody else's lives too. right? And then it creates this really difficult situation where solving problems becomes a finger pointing in different directions and so on. So that's one of my major concerns, is getting the idea that we're all in this together. This like spaceship Earth idea. Yeah. There's only one Earth, and if we're not going to solve it together, then we're all going to be screwed, and nobody wants that, right? So that's one of my major issues here. And but when it comes to like international problems, what I study, the environmental issues, I think that menstrual thing I told you is a really good example of how I try to think about these problems. That it's never one problem. You always understand, okay, we want to solve erosion, sure, but where in the system does that problem sit? And where might I be able to intervene elsewhere to not only solve that problem, but the problems that cause that problem? You see what I mean? And so I try to think systemically as a researcher, which, for people who do kind of on the ground work, they find that very frustrating. They're like, hey, get out of the clouds a bit. But it's important to see the overview and say, oh, if you intervene here, then you're going to have cascading effects to all these different areas. But if you just jump in at the end, you're only going to solve that one problem. And so, her work with menstruation is saying, yes, we're going to improve the lives of girls, but we're going to save you money, and we're going to improve the plumbing system, which will lead to less flooding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just that. And that allows tons of different people to get on board who might not share the same values, who might not even be interested in the same problem. So I think that that's a really healthy way of looking at it. And that, like we talked about before, that allows you to keep a little bit of optimism, because that those possible coalitions are there, even if people don't actually agree. And let's give one anecdote.
No, hit me.
A good friend of mine, he's an Irish guy. He works in New Orleans on his research, and he was studying this kind of very unusual group of people who had gotten together to try to stop a pipeline. So I don't know if you've ever been to New Orleans or Louisiana. Yeah, so there's pipelines everywhere, everywhere, literally. And so this new pipeline was just another new pipeline that was going to go right through the middle of a bunch of private property. And so what happened is, like, indigenous people, people who work with the shrimping industry, property owners, poor Black communities, all these different groups of people got together to fight this pipeline. And many of these groups literally hate each other. I mean, they just don't get along in real life.
Individually, the groups.
Yeah, exactly. So, the homeowners hate the environmentalists, because the environmentalists, like we talked about before, have always gone on their land and obstructed a bunch of stuff and brought the police there. Nobody likes that. But all these groups got together to fight this pipeline because they all had different but similar interests, right? I don't want it on my property. I don't want it on my sacred land. I don't want it to ruin my fishing industry. I don't want it to make us relocate our housing. Right. And somehow they were all able to organize against solving this problem in a way that solved all of their different problems, but it didn't, which is really important. It didn't involve all of them having the same values. And many environmentalists think that the first thing you have to do is change the values and then get them on your side. And I think that is a losing strategy. Like you said, the time, 50 years down the road, I mean, you can't even change values in people in a generation, let alone within the time we need to actually solve these problems. So that's how I try to think about it, even if it is a bit frustrating for people to be too abstract. Right. But that abstractness allows me in certain situations to bring it down to the ground and say, what does that abstractness mean here? Yeah. So that's my analytical focus. I love you so much. Such a nerd, dude. I'm sorry.
No. Dude, are you kidding me? This is such a do with life. So on a candid perspective with this show, I've had a lot of feedback, and some of the feedback, man, is not good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So for instance, Chad Boda, you're visiting. I love you. Somebody doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't know who that person may be.
I'm sure there's many.
But watch this. I'm minding my business. I literally get a phone call. Why in the world did you have that guy on the show? He's this, he's that. And I'm like, did you listen to the show? So you bring up a great point, is that I've learned this the hard way, meaning who doesn't want everyone to like what you like? And it'd be great. You'd only need one kind of soda in there, whatever you will drink, whatever you eat. You don't have to diversify. You just have that one, and then everyone comes over, likes their coffee black, so you don't need the cream. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in life. And what I've learned is that you're like amplifying it to even more. So yes, in your backyard, in your local watering hole, if all they had is Guinness and that's all you cared about, then what do you care? But it's something really important to having the diversity of thought. That's so important, man. And I'm learning that now. And it's so crazy you're talking about it, because you and I definitely want the same thing. Most of us don't want to die. That's usually I asked a guy the other day, actually my grandfather, more importantly than anything, I asked him, with artificial intelligence getting more and more, I would say, in our grasp, still being probably not in our lifetime, but it's coming. Would you put if we could understand this consciousness in a being? Huge question. Grandfather immediately says yes. I don't answer right away because I really don't truly have a question yet.
Yeah.
I've been asking that to some of my friends and local people, like, would you do it? Because it's fascinating here. There's a really big split. Some say yes right away, and some say no right away. But the crazy thing about it is that nobody really wants to die now. You know, I think those that have a hope and a faith in a afterlife, if it's something better than now, maybe they're looking forward to that. But I don't think anybody would hit a button now that would, end their life if you're in a good mental place. So point being what you say about, here's the goal. You don't have to be the same color as me. You don't got to like what I eat. You don't got to you can lock your dog in the car. But here's the point. We got a thing going on, and it's coming. So here's when you were talking about that as well, in parallel, there's a huge movement in a lot of people now, the scientists and that are they're looking for ways of sustainability outside the earth. And from my research, and of course, this is a really small little crew, but it's big, but it's not a lot. I'm not going to run into 5 people today that care about it, probably. But there's a lot of controversy about it. We're literally looking, and of course you see the memes and you see people say that we're putting money forth towards, dune restoration, and we got homelessness. You have that.
Sure.
I don't get involved in that.
But
what I do think is interesting is we're sending spaceships and we're sending things out there to find out if there's sustainability under the planet. What's your opinion on that?
I mean, I've always been, I told you I started my college career with astrophysics. Like I've always been a big nerd for space. So I'm excited about a lot of the progress that's being made in the space industry. I find it depressing when people talk about that as the solution to the Earth's problems, because that's basically saying like, we're screwed and let's go live on Mars.
Right.
So that I have a bit of a problem with, but definitely I think it's exciting. My brother Matt is somebody who's like, who cares? Who cares if the world, I mean, he doesn't really mean this, but he talks like this, Who cares if the world is going to get destroyed? Elon Musk is going to have 50 people on Mars by 2030. And it's like, that does seem like a solution to me. So I have absolutely no problem. And not only that, I find it extremely exciting. This kind of stuff. But the space travel, fascinating. I've been more and more interested in like the microphysics stuff that they've been doing. They've been making incredibly like fascinating and bizarre progress in this area. So one thing I was watching recently is that they're talking about the need to bail out on the idea of space-time, right? So that's something we've all grown up with, that there's like time, 4 dimensions? There's X, Y, Z, and then there's time, right? And they're saying that doesn't make sense anymore in the way that they're studying physics. And so what they do is they have these little particles that they speed up to like almost the speed of light, and they smash them together. And when they do that, they're able to like study how the universe used to look super, super long ago. And this guy was saying the smaller we want to get, the more energy we have to put in, right? So they're starting to have more energy than you have in a nuclear power plant in an atom that's smashing into another atom, right? And I kept thinking, what is the point of going so deep? But the deeper they go, the more macro they can go, because the more they understand those microfibers of how the universe works, the more realistic it becomes to overcome things like the speed of light and so on. So all that space travel stuff is linked also to this like super micro study of the tiniest little particles in the universe,
right?
Because that's where the mystery really lies. At the macro level, we know everything basically. Now it's a lot of engineering and testing and so on.
Right.
But if we can overcome some of those physical barriers, which is already being made, the progress is being made, then we start talking about crazy things like teleportation and whatever. And I mean, these Harvard physicists are saying it might not be that crazy. Actually, we might be able to do these things in the future. That's I find extremely exciting.
This is where I love you so much. I could talk about this all day, because I just talked about like 2 episodes ago, and shout out to Blake Wall, because as I was doing it, he was like my Jamie on Joe Rogan. There was a scientist who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 that absolutely now it's a fact that space is a fabric. And if it's a fabric, it's tangible. If it's tangible, it's
twisted and poke holes in it and do all kinds of stuff.
And if time, it's just, But isn't it funny, as you were saying that too, from a layman's perspective, isn't it funny that figuring out how this world works and implementing, getting down to the micro, we understand the macro. And it's just like with life. Instead of trying to look at life and get the best job and get to this, and start small, keep it simple. And I've learned this now after the last 15 plus years or so being W-2 free and like having to pay my own bills. What you do with a little, you do with a lot. So don't try. I would have never been able to sustain myself with $1 million income day one. I'm 17 years old out of high school, and Pickle Clothing blows up. I make $1 million. I probably would have just You know, who knows what it would.
Yeah,
I would have tried to get to Pluto. You know, I have no idea. But point is, you start small, think small, and then get bigger. And as you learn more, then spread it. So the space thing, man, is like I'm being consumed by it. The only book I ever read was when it came to the space world was Neil deGrasse's like Astrophysicist for like a Dummy.
Yeah,
that's not the title, but amazing. And of course, like every third word, I had no idea what it was. And I'm like Googling it and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to try to use that in my vernacular tomorrow. Never happens. But point is, what an amazing thing that is out there. And it's actually, I believe that it's a lot smaller than we were built to believe, meaning that it's possible. We're going to get there. The thing that I like to make pretend, me and Brandon Brown and I did this the other day. We were pretending as if we were going to have the jet where we would go and stuff. If it was possible right now, I don't know if I would go. Would you?
To Mars or something?
But like forever.
No.
Yeah.
No, I would not go.
Yeah.
No.
Not ready.
No. And I'm not, I'm not that adventurous. I mean, I have people I love here. And
right.
I mean, I'm perfectly fine with going canoeing in Ocala. I don't need to go to Mars. But I support it,
Did you hear one of the ways that one of these scientists are supposedly going to make the atmosphere in Mars livable is that they were going to do the greenhouse? They were going to actually create carbon.
Yeah, I have heard that. Yeah,
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that's what I'm just with understanding. You can do all kinds of crazy things.
I don't know.
It's fascinating to me that we have that enough understanding of the greenhouse effect to go and cause it on Mars, but not enough political power or political motivation to solve the problem here.
Isn't it fascinating?
I mean, we understand what's happening so well.
I know.
We just don't have people who are committed to doing it. And a big reason is it costs a lot of money, and there's a lot of money to be lost in the process. So it's not for no reason, but earth over money kind of thing.
Well, I think you're pretty rooted when it comes to like, I'm not going to, you'll never see me stopping traffic in I-4 ever, unless there's like an animal walking across. I would do it
for a turtle.
I would do it for a turtle. And, but I'm never going to actually try to make a statement by, doing something. So I would say comical, because here's the point. I know we're up against I don't want to get conspiracy Patrick Kelly with it, but it is true, man. Like we are up against the man, and it's like, there's a system in place.
No doubt about that.
And I've learned the hard way, very, very young. I thought I was going to change a lot of things and make statements, and it wasn't always for the betterment of the environment. It was just for my own fiscal gain. And the minute if someone's got more money than you, and you don't got that FU money, you're going to feel it.
Yeah.
And my grandfather taught me at a very, very young age. I was going to fight somebody, not physically, but like financially. I was like, I want to prove this, because it was a financial situation. I had uncovered something. I thought I was going to like blow the whistle. And don't get me wrong. If you find out that like someone has the cure of AIDS in a vial in the fridge that's down the road, absolutely blow the whistle. But if you're doing it for a financial gain, you're not going to you're not going to win, in my opinion, because there's going to be somebody with a bigger boat, bigger money, and they will fight you. So I understand that. Once, even the petroleum industry, I hope most people are educated enough to know, like, literally everything that I point at in this house has petroleum in it.
Yeah.
Everything. No, I don't think there's anything in this house, excluding maybe the plant, but it's probably even sucking the petroleum from the ground in which it's in, that doesn't have some source of petroleum in the manufacturing process from the. So I'm never going to sit here and go rape and pillage and try to get the oil refinery shut down until we're talking thousands and thousands of years, probably. Maybe that's a little drastic, until like petroleum is no longer of use.
Yeah, that's probably
a fair statement.
I think it's true, sure. And I think that what I hear that you're getting at is, why are you suggesting we shut it down when you don't have an alternative? And I think that's absolutely true. And that was what I was saying is so frustrating about these students or whatever who go out and feel that they're so radical by just acting.
Right.
And you're like, so you're telling this person they shouldn't drive anymore. How are they going to get to work? You're just telling them they should walk instead? I mean, that's ridiculous. Come on. You have to have an alternative. You have to say, this is problematic, so we should be doing this instead, and here's why.
Right.
And here are the steps to get there. Right. And I think it's the exact same thing with what you're just talking about. So, yeah, I mean, I get frustrated at the idea that immediateness is what is effective, because I think it's the exact opposite. It actually makes people repulsed by what you're trying to do.
Right.
And I actually think that, a lot of it is because it's trapped in your kind of class status, right? So if you're a middle class person who has everything you need, then getting rid of a car might not be the most scary thing in the world, because you have, public transit or a nice bike, or you live in the city or something. But if you live out in the countryside and somebody in the city is telling you can't drive anymore, you're very rightfully so going to say, what the hell are you talking about?
Right.
So instead you say, we want to reduce car driving, so we want to build you a really good bus system, a really good train system, somehow give them the opportunity to continue to live their lives without just robbing them of the ability to do so in the name of the environment. I think that's a losing strategy, and it's already been losing. Actually, it's in the U.S. you see it all the time when conservatives can point to really extremely unrealistic environmental suggestions and say, look at these people, they're not serious. And I happen to agree with that, actually. Yeah. So one of the few things I agree with Trump on is that a lot of Democrats suggest things that are just sensationalized and aren't actually serious.
What's an example?
So I was going to give a counter example that I was going to say, I do not think that the Green New Deal is that. I think the Green New Deal is a very serious suggestion. A lot of people are trying to shut it down. But that's my opinion, and I can take that discussion.
You just broke the internet
with anybody else.
Just broke the internet, bro.
Fine. I know a lot of people aren't into it, but it's actually not. It's not any different than what you'd find in a lot of kind of mainstream social democratic countries in Europe. So I don't think it's that radical. But I mean, there have been some suggestions about, I don't know. I think you probably find this stuff more often in Germany and Sweden and Denmark and stuff, where they have really radical young environmentalists than you will in the U.S. But it's just suggestions of shut the oil industry down now, and you're like, what does that mean? Yeah. Even I mean, like you just gave.
There goes my mouse.
It just doesn't make any sense, right? And so we use a framework in teaching. We talk about people who are problematically modern. They say this is modernity and that's it. Deal with it. Right. And then some people who are critical modern. They say yes, this is modernity, but it's really problematic when you just fix it. And then some people are anti-modern. They say modernity is bad. We should go back to the way it used to be before we modernized. And that, I think, is basically, I mean, it's deep conservatism, which without recognizing it, first of all. And I think it's also ahistorical and unprogressive. The idea that we should all go back and be farmers again. It's like, what are you talking about? Right. And a lot of people who have this idea that shut the oil industry down right now also think that modernity itself is a problematic and bad thing. And I don't agree with that at all, actually. I think that, capitalism brought great things to the world. It has tons of problems too, but you have to acknowledge that it's better than feudalism. Right. I mean, so I see progress in the world overall. A lot of problems still, but things tend to get better over time. That's my philosophy.
I agree with you on that, meaning also too that, for instance, we know it's a fact for those that are educating themselves that we can now almost pretty much produce food really easy, really inexpensively. Whether it's hybrid, whether it's, what do they call the hydroponics and things of that nature, all of stuff can be, it's so diverse too, because that leaves us being able to do it in a place with no atmosphere or our very own. And I'm a big believer in, once again, the commercialization and the way that and of course, from just whatever, demand, if you want to call it, we're still far out before, once that starts to make, once there's money, big money, then it will start to happen. But we're still far out, but it's still something that can be implemented. And we do it here. My wife and I are by no means the perfect example of like how to live, like eco-friendly, but like we're trying, but within 10 feet of here, there's probably 100 things that have something in it that is not good, not only for us, but the environment. And it's tough, but it does start with, you have to have hope, man. And that's one thing that the whole purpose of this little show is, just to remind people that it is a beautiful place. Yeah. And I told my dad this the other day. He didn't like it too much, but I said, sometimes I think like the earth was heaven at one point. You know what I mean? I know that's contrary to what the Bible and all that. And so I don't want to get into that.
The image of.
Right. Supposedly. But it's so beautiful if you really think about it. Anything that wasn't created by a human, even though there's beauty in that, but if you actually look at how this perfect world goes around, it's just such beauty in it. And then you do add us as a species. We're pretty cool. We're not as smart as we think. Neil deGrasse said this the other day, and not the other day, but I saw it the other day. And he was actually having a really fun argument with I believe, an environmentalist. And they don't get along very well, do they? Astrophysicists and
Neil deGrasse Tyson is he likes to be very provocative.
Yeah, he likes that. So they were having a disagreement on a stage in a public forum, and he asked this guy. He said, "Is it a true statement that we share like 90 some odd % of the same genome as an ape?" And I think it's not. Is it 99 or something?
I don't know. It's something like that.
It's up there.
Yeah.
It's 90 some odd.
Yeah.
So of course it was a rhetorical question. The guy says yes. And he goes, so we only like have this much, that much of a difference. He goes, and we think that we're smart. So he was just provoking. And of course, but the argument and the substance to it was the fact that we're really not that cool. And that's what I extracted from it. Like, we're cool, we're awesome, but we're also part of something cooler.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Neil deGrasse was kind of preaching at that moment, was that we're not, we have no right to make rules and regulations on this beautiful Mother Earth if it's not for the betterment of her and just for us, because we're not it. And I told my grandfather this the other day, because we do a lot of this kind of talk at family dinners and stuff. And I said, I don't think we as a species will be here too much longer. And too much longer, I mean, like, I don't know, 5,000 years, maybe 10, 5 to 10,000.
Okay.
I don't think we'll be as the same species at all. And I don't think it's a bad thing. But they did say recently in a study that we as a species, our brain are getting smaller. That was a study that was released.
Yeah, jaws are changing, all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah.
I asked my grandfather that. What do you think? What's your opinion on why humans' brains are smaller? Is it because we're computing more data, or we're becoming dumber at a faster rate? What's your opinion?
I mean, I think I don't understand the biology very well, but my understanding is that the brain is becoming more efficient, right? Yeah. So it got really big, and then now when it's shrinking back down again, it's doing so in a way that preserves its complexity, but is being more and more efficient. So it's getting smaller, so you don't have to spend so much energy on it, So that's how I understand it, but I don't know that stuff too much.
I hope. I want to believe that with you.
I want to say something about what you said. I mean, I really love Neil deGrasse Tyson, and this idea that we're not special, and I sympathize with it, especially in terms of like life overall. But his big mentor was Carl Sagan. I don't know if you remember him.
Not familiar with him.
So Carl Sagan was a big scientist in the 1960s. He created that show Cosmos, which Neil deGrasse Tyson redid just recently. And so he was one of the most famous public intellectuals in the 1960s. He was very much against the Cold War, for example, and spoke out a lot against these things, against nuclear annihilation and so on. And I always remember this phrase from him because he loved to tell people, we are really special. And that's why you should care about what's happening to people around you and to the earth and so on.
deGrasse's mentor.
Yeah. And so he has this phrase. He says, we are the way for the universe to know itself. Oof. I think that's really deep and powerful, right? And he says, and because of that, because we are laden with the responsibility of being the thinking apparatus for the whole universe, we have the obligation to do it well, and we have the obligation to allow everybody to participate in it too, because our collective brain is the issue here. You know what I mean? And so he used that as like a way into humanism, a way of deeply appreciating and having some foundations for respecting other people. Wow. And he was a fantastic person. He died of cancer after having, huge influence on American society overall, saying, we all live on this tiny little earth. And if you're not in it with everybody, then, we're doomed, basically. And I've seen that, in my travels. I've been very, very lucky to be able to travel around the world quite a bit. And everywhere you go, people are fascinating. People are smart and interesting and kind. I told my grandmother this. My grandmother was, especially later in her life, she didn't do a lot of traveling, and she was afraid of the world a lot. So I told her I went to Africa, and she was like, oh my God, isn't that scary? And I was like, scary? No, it was amazing. She's like, but isn't it dangerous? And I said, no, Grandma, everywhere you go, people are kind. And she started crying out of this intense realization that she had not thought of the world correctly, that she had been afraid of things that aren't scary. And when I said no, they're not scary, they're helpful, they're kind, it's wonderful. Right. She's like, oh my God, that's so nice to know that it's not scary, because I had always thought it was this place that I wouldn't venture into, you know what I mean? Right. And that's totally been my experience. I mean, even people who have nothing invite you in and offer you stuff if you need it, and you have, you're driving a big truck. This happened to me, Ian, Skylar, and Satrak. We went on a surfing trip to Nicaragua. We got lost. And finally, we come across this place, and we asked the people, where can we find food? And she's like, come on in. This lady lived in a shack on the side of the ocean, no paved roads for 100 miles in any direction. And she served us what she happened to have, which was not much, but still. I mean, and we gave her money in the end. She was reluctant to take it. But, I mean, that's deep kindness in a way that it's hard to find sometimes these days, So that's how I see the world, too. And I think that diversity, the diversity and the complexity of the human world, there's a commonality in it all, too. So we're all in it together. We all have the same kind of empathetic disposition to care about people around us, unless we're trained not to. And that's what I was saying about my biggest fear in the U.S. is the idea that it's good to not care about other people. I really find problematic. Yeah.
You bring up, so I can't take, I've been saying this and I feel bad because as the show's evolving, I wonder if some of the things I'm saying are becoming a bit redundant, but they're so good and they're powerful to me and they're kind of like my own scroll. And that is, Elon Musk he's so good with numbers. Like he's a Rain Man, obviously, but he said they're like out of an X% amount of people, less than 3% of that crew, whatever the number was, are like barbaric, that have an ill will, whether it's psychologically disorder or they're just mean, but the rest are humans. And there's hope for humanity. Because Rogan asked him at the end of the show, he goes, well, what do you, because Tesla doesn't have commercials and what the hell does he care? He's not selling anything that he didn't need Rogan to tell anybody anything.
Yeah.
But his mission was have hope in humanity. And it was so powerful because you're this like, and I'm not fascinated anymore by like the billions of dollars that he may have. I'm more fascinated with, does he sleep well? You know, and he didn't seem to sleep too well because he's a little too Rain Man-y. Like he's got a lot going on in his noggin.
I bet.
But when you just boil it down, it's such a beautiful thing. And there's, I have people in my immediate family right now that have never been in an airplane. And that it's not about, because travel can be this like very commercialized thing. Like you need to travel, coming from Flagler, like screw Bob goes and Flagler, got to get you. But there is something about removing yourself from your comfort zone and go somewhere you can't speak the language and watch how fast, as long as your mind's right. Don't go there trying to make them, go there.
That's a very good point. Actually.
Well, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
I've been
louder because people don't understand and you don't realize we speak another language.
I don't want to blow anybody out, but I was traveling a bit with some people and we were in a country and there was a language difference and I was picking up, I could get by and I'll never forget, like, let's say you're the bartender or whatever. And there's someone here, they would go, tell him that I want a Coke. And I'm like, and you're like, you want a Coke? And it was just so funny, this disconnect. Like you said, there's this, people just think that like, there's no way they'll understand me.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when you just become, humans were so, there's this really intimate thing that for the most part, it doesn't need to be taught unless it's taught elsewhere to kill, steal, cheat. For the most part, someone's going to pick you up when you're on the ground.
Yeah. There's a really famous economist who's like the guru of conservatives, right? His name's Friedrich Hayek.
Okay.
He's an Austrian guy who came to the US a long time ago. And he's like the most like deepest philosopher in terms of why we need a free market, right? So anybody who's like, go free market is building on Friedrich Hayek's work, right? So he's the Einstein of the conservative free market perspective, right? And his idea is the world and humans are kind of inherently communal. We want to get along with each other,
right?
And that's how we've always been. He looks into history, right? So he's like many economists are completely ahistorical. They say the economy is the economy, and that's it.
Right.
You could drop a person anywhere, and they would be able to function if they knew what we know now. But that's not true, of course. Capitalism is a new kind of system and hasn't always been that way. So Friedrich Hayek goes historically and shows people have always been communal. But the good thing about capitalism is that you don't have to be communal because communitarianism is extremely inefficient. Right. So if everybody individualizes and we deal through the market, everything will happen much quicker. And he was right about that, actually. But he didn't find those communitarian values to be of inherent value of themselves.
Interesting.
So he thought that they were an obstruction to human progress. And so even he accepted the idea that we are inherently actually communitarian people. And then he argued against Karl Marx, saying that's not a good thing. It's a bad thing, actually. And this new system that you hate so much is actually the good thing.
Right.
And that's a big, big disagreement. I mean, as about as polarized as you can get. But those are the two perspectives. And they both accept we are inherently communitarian. So I think that's a really interesting thing to bring up because it's not just leftists that have that idea.
Right.
Rightists accept it too. And then they say, yeah, but we might not want to do that, actually.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So I always like to use that as a way of supporting this idea that, hey, it is in our nature to be nice to each other, but we live in a system that doesn't incentivize that. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of it, though, and this is just my little Flagler Beach mentality, is that I'm not connected a lot to the. I don't have the cable and I don't watch TV shows and stuff. And I'm not trying to sound like Gandhi over here. I just don't. I haven't for a long time. I just don't find it like good for my brain because I can get sucked into it.
Yeah.
But point is that when you want to talk about this like media, it's just that's what it is, man. And like if you can't disconnect from it, which I don't know, and I'm not trying to pinpoint people into a specific genre of folk, but I mean, there is a large population of people. I had someone say to me the other day, which literally I almost passed out. They said, if it's not on Fox News, it's not news. And not even jokingly, like not even like, haha,
yeah,
like point blank, black boom.
Yeah.
And in the same breath, also told somebody who sought counsel to them not to go to a particular country because it was so bad. One of which that Brandon Brown had just like came from. Yeah. And I heard about how it was like his top place to go. I'm overhearing this. Yeah. And you want to talk about like, it's like I see the dog in the car dying. Like I'm just like, what in the world is going on? Yeah. And the thing that the tipping point of it all was like, it was someone like 15 years my senior. And I'm like, you can't possibly, you can. So I'm trying to teach myself like, oh my God. So whatever book he's reading from, whatever show he's watching. And you know, it's funny because I don't like to argue very much, but I do like to prove I just like facts. I was like, oh, did you know that Disney just bought pretty much everything in the world? Yeah. I was like, well, point is they did.
What about Time Warner or something?
Yeah. Which Fox is a syndication. Yeah. So of course Disney is extremely not Republican. Yeah. If you do your research. And so I'm just like, but like you said, like when you boil it down, so how many other people would have probably just like screamed and threw a glass and said like, you fool, like CNN's better when like that's even worse.
Yeah, you're a Trump voter.
Yeah. No. Let's go back down. You're watching Disney. And then more important, there's nothing wrong against Disney, but it's literally Disney. It's like it's a there's like what now 5 major syndications in the world. Yeah. Imagine if we only had 5 books we've ever read.
These are private companies though, right? So there's national news all over the place.
No. I'm talking our state based. Yeah. And I don't know if people know that. I'm assuming I hope people are educating themselves that if you're watching TV and you're watching news, there's like 5 dudes in a room. Yeah. That are literally going. It's 5. Yeah. Even a basketball team's what, 6, 7? Even a sports team is more than that. Yeah. Like what sport do you play that's that? Maybe volleyball, but I don't have no idea. How could you run a systematic process of information from 5 people? And of course, those 5 don't even get along. Yeah. They're all fighting.
It's very likely that they get their mandate from the central company. They say, this is the topics you're going to talk about today. That's how it often happens. There's even, forget the name of them right now. I'll probably remember it halfway through the rest of this session here. But it's a kind of a conservative funded organization that feeds local news stations all around the country. So I can't remember that. They're called the something group. Anyways, what they do is they provide prepackaged knowledge, like prepackaged information that like is disseminated
for the day or something.
Yeah, for the day, that's disseminated to local news stations all around the country, and it's a centralized provider of that news. And so there have been cases where they read these like, very conservative messages all at the same time across 180,000 different news stations in the country. Like it's crazy, and that's because it's corporatized. Like so, there's a private company that can provide all that. And I'm using all this as a way of leading into the fact that U.S. media is an absolute circus. Do you speak another language?
I do. Well, I can get by on the Spanish.
Okay. So have you ever watched Spanish news? Yeah. Like just like national news, like European national news is
any news
is what you would expect from most news, where it's just boring. Right. It's just people saying this is what happened today and this is what is expected tomorrow. Right. And then it's over. So in Sweden,
it's not sensationalized.
Exactly. And it's not a 24-hour news cycle. Right. So in Sweden, there's a hour block in the evening where they cover the day's news, and then that's it. Otherwise, you read a newspaper or you go online. But here, they have to constantly keep the news up because they have a 24-hour news model, business model. So they're always talking about nothing. And when you watch, you put on CNN, you're like, what is going on here? They're arguing over something that might become an issue in the future. And you're like, what is that? And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that they have nothing to do but talk about all the differences in society and all the anger. And so people watch it and become attuned to it and become really angry. And then you have, kind people that watch Fox News every day or it's just as bad. So I don't like Fox News. I also very much hate things like MSNBC. Rachel Maddow is one of the worst, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of Tucker Carlson, but I will put Rachel Maddow in his box in terms of like propaganda and completely manipulating the message. And so I have a huge problem with U.S. media in general. And I think that the reason it is the way it is because it's a profit-driven news model. And in order to have watchers all the time, they have to constantly remind you there's something to be scared of, something to be afraid of. You have to watch it in order to make sure that it's not going to get you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And Fox is great at doing that, but I would never say that they're the only ones, actually.
Right.
So
you're bringing up such an even crazier point. So on a tangent, I'm watching this really interesting lady on Joe Rogan the other day who was talking about the sensationalized movement and how we're like, as usual as a society, more state-based driven. We're always so contradictory to ourselves. So for instance, let's talk about that Me Too thing again, right? Empowering women and those that may be being subdued, whether it's unfortunately, if it's physical, financial, educational, etc. So we've identified that. We're trying to bring this message to the world, but yet what still gets more likes on an Instagram account?
Yeah.
A really nice rear end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Now, what happens? So this woman's saying, here we are as a society.
Yeah.
We're trying to educate. We're trying to bring this. Women, you are smart. You can be. You're this. And it's not just a man-girl thing. It's just the fact that what still do we find interesting?
Yeah.
So Rogan and her are having this wonderful conversation about, once again, here you have where the money is, people will go to. And until people stop, here's my theory, until people stop chasing the American dream, because there's no such thing of it in my belief. I would think it's called the human dream. Like, I would think we're so programmed that it's just small age, like the American dream. And though that was never really said to us, I think verbatim, it's still like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
You know, and like, I wish someone would have said, like, what square footage of house do you think you need? And like, teach somebody, you don't even need more than X. And then you start to say, okay, well, maybe I don't need the, you know, and if you have a 10,000 square foot home, awesome. I think those are great too, as long as they don't own you. But we chase the money, and that's what the media is. I mean, look about it. Look at every newscaster. Look at every person that's behind the camera. Yeah. They are sexy, men and women. They all are. And I mean, come on. That's why this show is. We're getting 1 million views out. No, but you see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't really.
Yeah.
And those, I think, there is a culture growing. You know, and Rogan was preaching that too with this woman. He said, listen, even though there are women that have no name but have nice rear ends that have 21 million followers and probably making 6 figures a month because they're selling their rear end, doesn't mean that there are still people, that is a movement and a culture of people that are saying, like, listen, life is beautiful and it's about this. And it's about educating yourself. And it's also just about here's what I wish people would do more often, is just make some time for yourself. You know, I'm starting to, as the show's growing and as my life's evolving, and it's not even just a byproduct of the show. And like, I'm getting the word busy as we get older. Like, how many times did I say I was busy? I've known you guys since we were kids. If you would have called me, like Matt and I, if Matt was coming over to sleep over my house in 6th grade and said, hey man, I'm sleeping over, I'm saying, I'm really busy today. Like, this doesn't leave your mouth, you know? And like you said, like, looking for the common ground. Like, boy, I can't, my mom be home in 10 minutes. Tell Jordanette to bring you over. You know, like, I'll meet you at Steak and Shake. You know, like, find like, you're fighting for the time. You're fighting for the communion. And now everybody is just, if I can't stand the word busy. I've never used it in my business life, in my friend life. You'll never hear me say, and all those that know me, I've never said busy, because I think I learned at a very young age by my grandfather's a big part of my mentorship, and just, if you're too busy, then you know what are you doing wrong? Your thing is poor time management. And there's nothing wrong. Like, for instance, you know how precious it is that I know you made time for me. I'm not saying people don't have stuff to do. So like, if for today if it didn't happen, I wouldn't say like, oh, it was too, you know, it isn't about being busy. It's like, I got things I have to do. A no thank you. I was telling my wife this today. Isn't it powerful when just someone says no thank you?
Yeah. And meaningful and definitive, which is great.
Not my,
we'll see, maybe I might get back to you. It's like, okay, now I have to hang on to this shit forever.
Just say no thank you. I'm starting to get people. I'm reaching out to people that I don't know, that I found. I saw someone online the other day who's a surrogate mother. I didn't know her from Adam. And I thought, wow, what the hell would the show that be? Reached out to her, absolutely said no thank you.
Yeah. This is actually something that I've had to get used to in Sweden, because, you know, we're very flip-floppy in the US. I mean, people here don't recognize it because we all do it to each other. You're like, hey, let's go out for a coffee. Yeah, cool. Maybe next week, something. Yeah, sure. See you. And you leave.
Right.
In Sweden, if you're like, hey, let's go out for a coffee, they're like, when? They pull out their book and they're like, okay, when? And if you're like, oh, I didn't, you know, oh, you don't mean it. Oh, okay. Thanks for saying it then, jerk.
Powerful.
So they never have these, like, you know, I mean, I don't want to paint it like people are disingenuous or anything.
I know what you mean.
They're shallow in a way, like superficial, I should say. Not shallow. Shallow has too much of a negative connotation, but we don't really mean it, and that's just a way of kind of bantering back and forth.
Right.
But in Sweden, if you do that, people are offended. Like, so, well, you don't want to have a coffee with me then? Why did you mention it?
Right.
What are you doing? And so a lot of people think of Swedes as like really kind of reserved and even kind of cold.
Yeah.
But it's only that they are not interested in being up in your business if you haven't asked them to be.
Right.
And Americans will just get in your business constantly.
Yeah.
When you're buying a jug of milk, you'll end up having a 15-minute conversation, which is nice. I mean, I like it often. But in Sweden, the idea is that it's polite to leave people alone. I mean, unless they want to interact with you.
Right.
So I feel that that's something that, you know, has helped me learn a lot about myself too. So you said, you know, be by yourself. Moving to Sweden was something that, I mean, I met a lot of great friends, but that was the first time in my life I was by myself, alone. Like completely, you know. It's not I went on vacation alone, which I'd done. I was alone in a new world with a whole new pathway ahead that was only my responsibility, and that required a whole lot of reflection, a whole lot of, you know, willingness to accept the fact that maybe my personality wasn't perfect. And I had good friends, and good friends are people who walk up to you and say, "Stop doing that because you're ruining it for everybody else." And I had to say, thank you for telling me that. And be, you know, I'm not a humble person necessarily, but it took a long time to internalize it and say, they're right. And I'm never, ever going to function here if I don't accept what they've said and try to do something about it. And I've become a very different person in the process. You know what I mean? And, you know, that takes a good friend too, to be like, hey, shut up for a second.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of people that were helping me there.
It's crazy because I never applied myself scholastically. So I felt this. I went on my own little life journey, and I like speed tracked, lived in my car for like 6 months to 7 months, lived in another country for all by myself for about a year and a half, give or take. And my point is that, man, was it, I like hated myself in the beginning.
Me too. I was embarrassed of everything I did.
Yeah, so codependent. And I remember I was I had just moved to this country. I was all by myself, one-way ticket. My family hated it. Everybody hated it. I hated it. And it really taught me who I was. It stripped myself. And in my case, not only did it, where I was living at the time too, it wasn't fancy. So I stripped myself of vanity. I had stripped myself of this materialistic lifestyle that I was pursuing. And I became a part of a culture that was so strong and passionate that it literally made me who I am now. And I'm using a lot of umbrella terms because it's not about the country. It's not about the culture. It was the principle of realizing the fact that I am not that cool. I can get cool, but it's even more cool to learn from somebody that's been through it before, and to realize how, you know, I don't want to sound barbaric and be like, we're not significant, but we're significant, but it's even more significant when it's in your immediate audience and you just listen and you love. And I learned so much, man. I really, really did. I used to get locked out of the house. I was living in a foster, like, I guess foster family wouldn't be the appropriate term, but I was like, living at a family's house that were letting me live there for exchange for working at the school. And I'm living there, and I didn't even understand the language really that much anymore at that point. And they would lock the door at like 6 o'clock. I wasn't allowed to get in the house. No food, no nothing, no bathroom. And it's from 6 p.m. And the closest like internet Wi-Fi was literally like an hour drive into their city. And to get there was atrocious. So I would be alone from like 5 to 6 p.m. to the next morning. You know, it's early. They woke up early. And that was it. I was all by myself. And I cried myself to sleep a lot, not because I was sad, but because everything that I thought that was awesome wasn't.
Yeah.
So
I know
like
exactly the feeling.
Yeah, you went through that?
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, the first thing you find is that your personality clashes terribly with this place you're in, and you start to think something's wrong with me. My personality is messed up somehow. But by interacting with that culture, you start to realize some parts of my personality are incompatible. Some parts are very compatible. And by doing that, you start to sort out what are the really deeply meaningful parts of your personality. And I mean, like your kindness and, you know, your willingness to listen and open up and whatever. And then the not so nice parts where I used to think that everybody should and did care about what I was saying. And that's certainly not the case, you know?
Right.
And when I first joined this master's program, because, you know, my master's program was 35 students from 25 countries. So it's a bunch of people from all over the place. And I was one of 2 Americans in the class. And one was from Northern California and I'm from Florida. So we're very different people anyways. And one of the first things they do is they put you into this kind of interactive scenario where you're with a bunch of other people who you don't know, who are from other countries and very different backgrounds, probably thinking in another language. And they give you a test where you have to like read instructions and then try to play a game together silent. But what they don't tell you is that everybody gets different instructions, right? And so what happened in this situation is that I read the instructions, and I know, at the time, I know I'm smart. I'm never wrong. Right. Everybody knows that I'm right, and so they should be listening to me. And I read my instructions, and we started to play, and people weren't doing it the way I thought it would happen. So I started really insisting, you're wrong. You must be wrong, because I know I read the instructions correctly. Right. So I bullied people into playing the game my way. And a lot of them listened. And then when they ended, they were like, everybody had different instructions. And then I started realizing, Jesus Christ, what have I just exposed about myself?
Right.
It was deeply frightening. I said, I just bullied all these super nice people because I have this American, self-entitled whatever. Yeah. And that's not a good thing, So I was able to work that kind of stuff out. But at the same time, a lot of people in my program like me because I'm an outgoing person. Right. I talk a lot, and I'm really happy, blah, blah, blah. Right. So I saved those parts and I lost the others. But that was a tough process, a learning process. And like you said, crying yourself to sleep, I felt lonely in a weird way. I felt lonely in my own body.
Yeah.
I didn't know who I was anymore for a while. And then I emerged into a different person, kind of like a butterfly, I feel,
Right.
So now I'm very happy with who I am. I know who I am now, and I didn't know who I was before. I think that's a big difference. And my friends that I met in Europe helped me sort that out. Although the good parts of me were already instilled from my friends from here. You know what I mean? So all the bad stuff picked up on my own, I can only imagine. But, Brandon was on here talking about Lost Boys, and that kind of deep friendship is something that is hard to find in Europe too.
Yeah.
So that's something that's really unique because we grew up in a tiny town with a lot of, really close-knit relations. And that means a lot to me. But, when I got over there, I started realizing, there's a lot to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a healthy experience for anybody to go through.
I don't know. I think if for anybody that's struggling with just happiness, or somebody told me something the other day, and they told me that their son was hated. They said something I had never even heard before, these words put together in a sentence, but the point was they hated their life or something. But it wasn't like he wants to kill himself or something. It was just more like he literally wakes up every single day and hates his life, so to speak. And I remember I couldn't help but think to myself, if there is a lot of people that think that way.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that's happening with this little show is that and we'll talk later in private, and I'm going to blow your mind, not with the people's names. So for those that do call me and share me with their stories, that's why they keep coming to me, because I don't kiss and tell. But I'm going to share with you some things that are they're better than any kind of monetary gain I could have ever expected.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was shooting for a while, and I know you should always have goals and aspirations. And it was as I started to evolve, and they weren't just a fiscal thing. I've always felt this entitlement, or not entitlement, this need that I need to teach people something. I always wanted to be a teacher. I tried teaching actually where I was living in that country. This wasn't for me. Thank God I tried it. And that's another thing too. Try things, people.
Yeah.
Try. It doesn't mean, unfortunately, with the way society is going, if you make a decision, it's going to take you 8 years to get there. Maybe better to go mop the floors or with the people that are doing it and get a sense for it. Get a sense for the smell of the room that you're going to be in. And if you don't like that, that's going to be your life for the next 50 years.
For sure.
And I learned that the hard way. That's how I try to teach people this now is get around the things and the people that you're going to be like. So I remember I wanted to be a teacher. That was my goal. I wanted to be a teacher. Computers and teachers, what I checked on the box. And I pursued it. And then once I started to teach, I didn't realize that I was going to be babysitting these people's children and then dealing with parents. I wasn't good at that. I expected my job was done. And when I had to do parent-teacher conferences, I remember I'm like, that wasn't when I checked the box, it didn't say I had to deal with teachers, but parents, but I didn't do my research. I was ignorant. So my goal is that for those that if you're bumming out, and everyone's got bummed out moments, but our life is our job. It should be. That's my belief. And you shouldn't hate it. And it should be a building block to something bigger and better. And I was talking about this to a buddy of mine the other day. I worked at Subway with Stephen Hobbs and Ed King. And I was 14 years old, and I hated it. I thought my boss was like the evil man of the world. I was like, this guy, if I would have looked at it in the perspective of if someone would put their arm around me and said, hey man, this guy owns this place. And he's probably having a really hard time paying the franchise fee, and they're doing a restructuring and make his life better. And imagine if I was 14 years old and had someone tell me that, hey man, why don't you bring a faster way of mopping it, using less water, save the guy money, you probably get a bonus. That's what it's all about. Once again, becoming part of the solution. But I don't know, man, it's really powerful. And I love you so much. And it's really, really, it's good to talk with you.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, the last thing you're saying about people who find themselves in situations that are tough to get out of, like, you know, I'm where I am now after 15 years of one milestone after the next, right? So I didn't just jump all the way here. Right. And there was a lot of hardship on the way. And so for me, you know, I think it can be really overwhelming for people to think I have this major ambition in life and it's all the way over there. Right. And it's either it's just too far or maybe I should dampen it. And for me, I think you definitely have to have those big ambitious goals in your life, because that's the only way to have some kind of goal from which you can start to mark out those milestones, right? So for me, I was like, I want to be a professor. And so I started saying, well, you know, I left Colorado State University too early. I didn't have a degree. I moved back to Florida. I couldn't go right back into Florida State. I did 2 years at community college, right? I was too smart for community college, damn it, right? No, I mean, I learned tons there. And not only that, but it got me right into FSU, which I finally I graduated from. And then I was able to go to my master's program. And then now I finished my PhD and so on. So that was something that even if I felt at the time, unjustifiably, I would say, that I was too good for community college, I could not have gotten anywhere without that community college. And not only that, some of my best teachers ever were at that community college trying their best to help people who are on the edge of dropping out of school anyways, you know? Saying if I'm going to commit my talents as a teacher, this is the place to do it, where people, you know, are, you know, going to go right or left. And I want them to help go right in terms of the correct path to a future in education and so on. So I would say, you know, set those major goals, and then, you know, with yourself, with your family, with your friends, try to mark out what steps need to be taken to get you there. And then start today on working on that first step. But know that there's many steps. And I think that it's so important to have this in mind, because, you know, each of those steps can seem meaningless in isolation, right? I'm working at Subway. What am I ever going to do with this? But if you're working at Subway in order to get the money to buy something that'll help you do the work you want to do, then that Subway job becomes meaningful. Right. And that's the same way I deal with environmental problems. You know, Flagler Beach can't just go and solve its beach problem. But if they can start getting people to join the beach cleanups more and getting them caring more, that's the first step to starting to solve that problem in a much more meaningful way. And that's how I think about it.
Amen, man. It's weird because I know I get, once again, you'll see, it's funny, like we'll go out today and I'll have a couple people that there'll be some constructive criticism. And one of the things that are starting to happen, because I could come off very like, you know, everyone can become a Willy Wonka, and that's not the case either. You know, it's not everyone's, you work is work. And the point is that I'm not saying you have to, but it's about building. It's about building, but never forming animosity or anger or resentment towards something or someone is something that I had to learn very, very hard. I used to just hate, I felt like the world owed me something. Started Pickle Clothing, 17 years old. I'm not a millionaire? I have CEO behind my name on my business card. Duh. What in the world's going on?
I thought it was supposed to start raining.
Like, hello. And I'm like, no one. And of course, like we were talking about this with another buddy of mine who had started a clothing company too. And he's like, the people that started wearing it weren't even the demographic in which I went after. And it wasn't a bad thing. It was just like, you think you know something and you think you're going for something. But the funny thing is once again, it boils down to what you do with a little bit, you're going to do with a lot. And I tell my wife this now: if I would have been presented with $1 million angel investment at 17 years old, even though I've always been a hamster with my money, I still probably would have effed it up somehow. There's just no way. And even in my little business now, if I got a phone call and I had 10,000 clients ready now that needed web projects, I can't take care of that. I may want to make myself believe I can, but you can't. So I've learned, like you said, all the little things that happen to you are literally a process of just, hey, it's problem solving. What are you going to do about this? And I've worked the jobs. I've done it. I've been there. And I know, I mean, I used to work at Staples, and I used to be, people would come in and I literally would be like doing a show. I was interviewing, like, why do you need this paper? I was so excited. I'm like, you're buying something for what? Like, you have a business? What do you do? You know, I want a business. And even though I had my little business, I didn't need any paper. So what are you doing with the paper? You know, I was so intrigued with how little did I know, my naive, that they probably have to get their health insurance on their own. They have to take care of a family without a W-2, like all the woebegone. And that's what it's all about. And I say something a lot to people too that have asked me, because I am really, really happy in my life, and I'm very happy with my marriage and things of that nature. And people will say, how'd you find a girl like Camille? And I really say, it's not romantic. My theory was I looked for every reason not to like her. I looked for every single reason to not like her, and because it was going to happen anyways. And I started that process when I moved back to the States, because
It's a very scientific approach, actually.
Yeah.
Try everything you can to falsify it. And then when you realize you can't falsify it, then it must be true.
Yeah.
I like it.
Josh, don't go in that back door. All right, you're good. No, that one you're good. No, the dogs would be fine, but I just don't know if he would be. But that was like, I've had a few people say, and it's not like, I don't want to sound like Romeo and Juliet over here. Like we have, we're humans, but I really did, man. I looked for it, and that's what I do now. And every little thing, you go on to look at a new car, look for every reason you will not like it.
I think one of the most important decisions you can ever make is what kind of job are you going to get? Because this kind of stuff really matters most. I mean, not most, but, really significantly in your work. Because if you have, what I like to think of as unalienated work, right? Work that isn't, somehow in no way connected to your actual interests, and that the products of that work in no way actually you find enriching, then that's really problematic, because you literally work for the weekend. And like, as the old song says, right? And that's a dangerous life to live, because then most of your life is spent doing things you don't want to do. Right. And I'm not at all suggesting, and I want to make this super clear, that everybody should become a professor. It's not for everybody. And it's not even that great, actually. Once you get up there, there's tons of stress. There's all kinds of problems with it too. So what I think is that that goal that I was talking about needs to be a goal that embodies your values, embodies what you think is important. And that's something that you can wake up every day wanting to do. And then whatever salary comes with that job, you should build a lifestyle around it. That's my philosophy. And people say, how did you get happy? How do you travel and stuff? And I'm like, I prioritize traveling. I don't have a car. I don't have all these things, but I also live in a place where I can not have a car. So they all tie together. I don't make tons of money, but, my girlfriend and I, we put money away to do traveling because that's what we prioritize. And we both work at jobs that we like. So me waking up every day and going to work is what I would want to do anyways. Right. And that's a really, really happy place to be. So happiness doesn't get conjured up out of nowhere. Happiness gets worked and built into your life. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what you're talking about, into your relationships, into your working life. Right. And if you can build those things up and, have a job that's meaningful, then you're doing a lot better than most people.
But also too, for those that, once again, let's just call them the haters, those that maybe that are frustrated, it is not pretty, man. It isn't. And we have to work. You gotta work, but there always is a process, and there's ways I look at it now where it's kind of like an old Italian saying, like, someone owes you a couple bucks, you got rid of them for those couple bucks. Yeah. And it's that can be transferred into almost anything. So if you're mad at your job, think about buying it. What is it? That's how I'm thinking. That's why I've been thinking for a hot minute now. You hate Subway? Buy the franchise.
Right. Exactly. And that's when your work at Subway can start to become a different kind of work. You say, oh, I'm not working at Subway because that's my job. I'm working at Subway to get money to buy a Subway.
Bada bing.
Right. And then all of a sudden, you know why you're doing what you're doing, and you're not sitting there saying, why the hell am I doing this job? Yep. And that's the only way really to keep focused on the future, to keep optimistic and so on. And people like Brandon and so on, that's what they did. They had models in mind, a lot of help. That's also something that I don't want to deny at all, that we had a lot of support, you know what I mean? And so you also got to keep good relations and to make sure that it's not only you fighting to the top, but you have people there helping you too. So.
But it does start here. I was talking about that on one of my most recent shows. The dude, a man named Paul, I have no idea who he is. And he was reluctant to even let me tag him on Facebook. Like the epitome of a nomad. Like I really had no idea who he was. He wanted to come on the show by reference of Carla Klein. I said, any friends of Carla Klein's a friend of mine. So I said, come on. But point is, like the silver lining to his entire, the chat was just, you got to keep he brought up the point of, and it happened, he was from London, and he said the same thing happens in London. People work to retire, and then they retire, and then they have a chronic illness. Exactly. And that's so true. And he brought it, and he's terrible. Yeah. He's at that point where he's the 50 nut and 60 nut. I actually don't even know how old he was. Great shaped guy, but point is, I think he started to realize that, wait a minute, more so than ever, like everyone around me now is he's seeing, like, what do you got now? So I'm super, it's funny, and I don't want to call anybody out, but I know more people now that they got that. If you have a 500 plus car payment a month and it's not a Ferrari, I don't get it. I understand if you got a 2.5 hour commute somewhere and you need that, but and then they say the same thing to me. You've been in my house a couple times. You see my life. I don't even know my car here anyways, but I've never even owned a new car. And then sometimes people are like, oh, you traveling again? I'm like, I have Nothing. And it's funny because I told my wife this, those that are starting to watch the show, I wear like the same shirt every like third episode because I have nothing. I have no, my life is like spent doing things, and it's very simple. I'd be like the easiest guy to kill. Like my life is pretty habitual. It's like soccer, show, work,
broadcasting this to the world.
Yeah, here I am. Come get me. But I don't have anything. And it's like, I wish people would have taught that to us. And we did. We came from such a wonderful community. I think we were super spoiled in a good way. Like we were safe. It was the people that were teaching us were friends and our family. They're still here. We came from a very small town that I haven't seen through all my travels. I think you shadow me when it comes to some of the places you've been, but one of the common denominators are we still have a very something special here. And it's a Flagler thing. It's just something here. But the point is that you don't need half this stuff. You don't
I mean, you put your finger on it. I think when you said, people come and say, well, how are you traveling again? So I don't have any problem people spending their money on an expensive car if that's what they want to do. But then you can't say, but why can't I do these other things too? And you say, that's relatively obvious, I think.
Right.
And it comes with sacrifices, I mean, like I live in a city where there's a lot of public transit and I can ride my bike around and that's great. But like you're pretty stuck if you want to go far or if you want to just go on a day trip. I mean, I don't even have a driver's license in Sweden, right? So
really,
that's a bizarre thing.
You don't need. Well, I've been there and I know you. I mean, there's a bus, there's all this stuff.
Like public transit is absolutely amazing. Everything is accessible except for like super, super isolated places, which I happen to like to go to sometimes for rock climbing or hiking or whatever. And my girlfriend has a license, of course, but we went, for example, to one of her friends' weddings and they had this rented this castle thing out in the middle of nowhere. It's like a 6-hour drive without any public transit access. And Linnea has to drive both directions. So that sucks, Right. But I mean, it's also something that I have the ability to do. So do you have your dual citizenship? Yeah. Do you really? Yeah. Awesome. So I got my citizenship in 2016. Awesome. Yeah. I had been a permanent resident since 2012. Does that jack you up a lot here with anything? Like nothing votings, anything? No. Okay, it's actually just easier. I mean, I enter the US super quick and I enter the EU super quick. Awesome. The Swedish and American kind of relationship is super solid. So, yeah. Actually, I think it was only in 2007 they allowed you to have dual citizenship without any family ties. Wow. But I was able to do it. They have something called Sambo, which is like living with a citizen. It's like the designation for living with a citizen, and that can expedite the process of getting your citizenship. And that I've had that since 2011. Yeah. Plus, you're helping their. I mean, you're part of their society. Yeah, working there is a big thing. Yeah. So I have 6 years of work experience now, and that also made a big difference. And I mean, there's no way of getting around it. I'm a white American man. That is a huge thing. So I have plenty of people who speak better Swedish than me, have been there longer, have more work experience, and still don't have their citizenship and have been interrogated on several occasions. When I did my citizenship meeting, they apologized for wasting my time. It was like the most weirdest thing that ever happened to anybody. Wow. So it took 15 minutes and they were like, sorry, you had to come all the way down here. It's pretty straightforward. Other people have been interrogated for 2 hours because they come from Colombia. Right. So that's a process that, as nice as Swedish people are and as much effort as they take to prop the system up in a way that's equal. Right. It never actually works out that way. Yeah. And I mean, they also have to make sure, are you coming here because you're going to study or you're coming here under the auspices of studying because you want to stay forever? Right. And they have to really try to work. You're staying forever. That's my plan. Yeah. I mean, we bought an apartment and planning family stuff. So good. Yeah. So we'll see how things. And how long we got you for? I'll be here. I'm going to Drew White's wedding, which is happening in the following week. Where is it? Boca Grande, which is north of Naples. Okay. Yeah, the Gasparilla area. And Matthew flies in Friday. That's right, the 10th. Okay. Really early. So I'll be hanging out with my brothers for the 11th, and then on the 12th, I'll head over to Drew's. But between now and then, I'll be around Flagler, seeing some friends. Has everyone got the memo? More or less, yeah. I mean, I have a chat with my Lost Boys friends and so on, so they all know. And this will help. Yeah, that's great. I was talking with Ian. Also, he's organizing this competition over the weekend. So you're going to go hanging out tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. There's supposed to be like the Breakaways Olympics or something going on. Yeah, exactly. So it'd be a big to do. That should be fun. And then tomorrow or Sunday rather, I'm going to be visiting my niece in South Florida. So that's nice, yeah. The Bodas and reunite. That's right. I better watch out. I thought I could feel something going on in the atmosphere. Hide your kids, hide your wives, hide your husbands. Well, listen, I love you very much, and thanks for coming. It was such a pleasure, man. Really. And anything, I think you're good. Is there anything else? I mean, you don't need to plug no business or nothing. You're just, Yeah, man. If you like the environment and you're headed into the master's area, get a hold of me. I can give you a good word for the master's program. But otherwise, shoot for the stars, man. That's all I can say. Love you, buddy. Thank you, buddy. Love you. Go to Turtle Shack.
it could happen now. Everyone's be there.
It's good times, man.
That was awesome, bro.
I like it.
You did.